Do you think my dad loves me? The whispered question from an 8-year-old girl shivering in a diner booth at midnight hit harder than any storm Chicago could throw. Talia Reed, a waitress pulling her third double shift that week, had just dragged that child out of freezing rain, wheelchair and all, because her billionaire father had left her outside for 2 hours while he closed a deal. What happened next wasn't just rescue. It was reckoning. When Damian Blackwell finally looked up from his empire long enough to see what he'd done, the collision between his world and Talia's would expose everything broken in both their lives, and force them to choose between the comfort of silence and the risk of becoming better. This is the story of how one forgotten child, one furious waitress, and one gutted father rebuilt each other from wreckage. Stay with me until the end, hit like, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The wind off Lake Michigan hit like a fist that December night, rattling the windows of Rosie's diner hard enough to make the fluorescent lights flicker. Talia Reed stood behind the counter at 11:47 p.m., her feet screaming in protest after 14 straight hours on the tile floor, her apron stained with ketchup, coffee, and the kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones when you've worked 3 double shifts in 4 days. She was wiping down the counter for the third time, not because it was dirty, but because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering that rent was due in 3 days, and she was still $200 short. The diner was nearly empty. Just old Pete in his usual corner booth, nursing his 4th cup of decaf and pretending to read a newspaper that was 2 weeks old, and a couple of college kids at the window table, splitting a plate of fries and whispering the kinds of promises people make at midnight when they're young enough to believe them. Talia glanced at the clock. 13 more minutes until she could flip the sign, lock the door, and drag herself to the bus stop. 13 more minutes of standing, smiling, pretending her lower back wasn't on fire, and her checking account wasn't a joke. Then she saw the wheelchair. At first she thought it was a trick of the streetlight, some shadow cast wrong by the storm. But when she moved closer to the window, pressing her palm against the cold glass, her stomach dropped. A child, maybe 8 years old, sitting in a wheelchair against the brick wall across the street, hunched forward like she was trying to make herself disappear. No coat, no umbrella. Just a thin purple hoodie soaked black by the rain, her dark curls plastered to her face, her small hands gripping the wheels like she was afraid the wind might blow her away. Jesus Christ, Talia's voice came out hoarse. She was already moving, yanking her own jacket off the hook by the kitchen, not bothering to call out to Marcus, the cook who'd been half asleep over the grill for the past hour. The bell above the door jangled violently as she shoved it open, and the cold hit her like a wall of ice water. The rain was brutal, fat, freezing drops that stung her face and turned the sidewalk into a minefield of puddles. Talia ran across the empty street, her sneakers splashing through water that soaked her socks instantly, her breath coming in sharp bursts that clouded in the December air. Hey, sweetheart! She dropped to her knees in front of the wheelchair, not caring that the pavement was filthy and wet. The girl didn't look up. She was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering, her lips tinged blue, her eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance that wasn't really there. Talia reached out slowly, touching the child's shoulder. Honey, what are you doing out here? Where's your mom? Your dad? No answer, just that terrible, rhythmic shaking. Talia looked around wildly, searching for someone, anyone who might explain this nightmare. The street was deserted except for a sleek black sedan parked 20 yards down, its engine running, its windows tinted dark enough that she couldn't see inside. Something about that car made her skin crawl, but she didn't have time to wonder about it. Okay, we're getting you inside, right now. Talia grabbed the handles of the wheelchair and pulled, but the chair didn't budge. One of the front wheels was wedged deep in a pothole, the axle stuck at an angle that had probably been impossible for the child to fix on her own. Come on, come on! Talia braced her feet, wrapped both hands around the frame, and heaved. The wheel popped free with a wet, sucking sound, and she nearly fell backward from the sudden release. She didn't stop to catch her breath. She just spun the chair around and pushed, moving as fast as she could across the street, through the rain, toward the diner's warm yellow glow. The bell jangled again as she muscled the wheelchair through the door. Marcus looked up from the grill, his eyes going wide. Holy hell, Talia, what? Get me towels. Now! And turn the heat up!" Marcus didn't argue. He disappeared into the back while Talia wheeled the girl over to the radiator in the corner, the one that clanked and hissed, but put out enough warmth to matter. She knelt down again, trying to meet the child's eyes. "Hi, sweetheart. My name's Talia. You're safe now, okay? We're gonna get you warm." The girl's gaze finally shifted, focusing on Talia's face with an intensity that was almost unnerving. Her eyes were dark brown, red-rimmed from cold or crying, or both, and filled with something Talia recognized instantly because she'd seen it in her own mirror too many times, the bone-deep certainty that help wasn't coming. Marcus returned with an armful of clean towels, and Talia wrapped them around the girl's shoulders, rubbing her arms gently, trying to get some circulation going. The child's skin was ice cold, her pulse visible in her throat, fast and fluttery like a bird's. "What's your name, honey?" Silence. Just those eyes, watching Talia like she was trying to decide if this was real or just another trick. "Okay, that's okay. You don't have to talk yet, but I'm going to make you something warm to eat, all right? You just sit here by the heat, and I'll be right back." Talia stood, her knees protesting, and moved behind the counter. Her hands were shaking, not from cold, but from rage so pure it made her vision blur. Someone had left this child out there. Someone had abandoned an 8-year-old girl in a wheelchair in the middle of a December storm and driven away like it didn't matter. She pulled out a plate, slapped together a grilled cheese sandwich the way her own mother used to make them. Butter on both sides of the bread, extra cheese in the middle, cooked slow until the outside was golden and crispy. She heated up tomato soup, the good kind they kept in the back for staff, not the watered-down crap they served customers. She poured a mug of hot chocolate and added a mountain of whipped cream because what 8-year-old didn't love whipped cream? When she carried everything back to the corner, the girl was still shaking, but less violently now. The towels had slipped from her shoulders, so Talia adjusted them, tucking them in tight. "Here you go, sweetheart. I know you're probably not hungry, but try a little for me, okay? It'll help." She set the plate on a small table next to the radiator, close enough that the girl could reach it without stretching. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, so slowly it broke Talia's heart, the child reached out one small hand, picked up half the sandwich, and took a tiny bite. Talia let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "That's good. That's so good. You're doing great." She pulled up a chair and sat down, not too close, giving the girl space. Behind her, she could hear Marcus muttering something in Spanish that probably wasn't family-friendly, and old Pete had gotten up from his booth to hover near the counter, his newspaper forgotten. "Should I call someone?" Pete asked quietly. "Police? Ambulance?" "Not yet," Talia said, her eyes still on the girl. "Let's get her warmed up first, make sure she's not hurt." The truth was, Talia didn't trust what would happen if she called the authorities right this second. She'd seen too many kids get swallowed by systems that didn't care, shuffled from office to office by people who were just putting in hours. This child needed warmth, food, and someone who'd stay. Everything else could wait 10 minutes. The girl ate slowly, mechanically, like her body knew it needed fuel, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. She finished half the sandwich and a few spoonfuls of soup before pushing the plate away and wrapping both hands around the mug of hot chocolate. She stared into it like it was a window into another world. Talia waited. She was good at waiting. Years of waitressing had taught her that sometimes silence was the only honest thing you could offer. Finally, the girl spoke. Her voice was so soft, Talia almost missed it. "He said he'd be right back." Talia's chest tightened. "Who said that, honey?" "My dad." The girl looked up, and Talia saw tears streaming down her face, silent and relentless. "He said he just had to make a call. He said it would only be 5 minutes." "How long ago was that?" The girl's face crumpled. "I don't know. A long time. The rain started and he didn't come. And I tried to knock on the window, but he didn't hear me, and then the wheel got stuck, and I couldn't. Her breathing was getting faster, more ragged, and Talia recognized the signs of panic setting in. She moved closer, crouching down so their faces were level. Hey, look at me. You're okay now. You're safe. Whatever happened out there, it's over. You're inside, you're warm, and I promise you, I swear to you, I'm not leaving until we figure this out." The girl stared at her, searching her face for the lie. But Talia had meant every word, and maybe the girl could see that because after a moment she nodded once, sharp and small. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Sky," came out as a whisper. "Sky Blackwell." Blackwell. Talia's mind stuttered over the name. She knew that name. Everyone in Chicago knew that name. Blackwell meant tech, meant billions, meant the kind of money that bought buildings and politicians and probably small countries. She glanced toward the window at the black sedan still idling across the street, and something cold slithered through her gut. "Your dad," Talia said carefully. "Is he in that car?" Sky followed her gaze and nodded. "What's he doing in there?" "Working." The word came out flat, resigned, like Sky had said it 1,000 times before and stopped expecting it to matter. "He's always working." Talia stood slowly, her hands curling into fists at her sides. Across the street, through the rain-streaked window, she could just barely make out the silhouette of a man in the driver's seat, illuminated by the blue glow of a laptop screen. "Marcus," she called over her shoulder, her voice tight. "Stay with Sky. Don't let her out of your sight." "Where are you going?" "To have a conversation." She was halfway to the door when Sky's voice stopped her. "Please don't make him angry." Talia turned. The girl's face was drawn tight with fear, not of the cold, not of being abandoned, but of what would happen if someone dared to challenge her father. "Sweetheart," Talia said softly, "I'm not going to make him angry. I'm just going to make sure he knows you're safe." It was only half a lie. What she really wanted to do was drag Damian Blackwell out of that car by his collar and ask him what the hell kind of man left his disabled daughter in the rain for 2 hours while he closed a deal. But Sky didn't need to see that, so Talia forced herself to breathe, to unclench her jaw, to walk, not storm, out the door and across the street. The rain was still brutal, icy and relentless, but Talia barely felt it. She marched up to the driver's side window and knocked, hard enough to rattle the glass. Nothing. The man inside didn't even look up. She knocked again, louder. "Hey, open up!" Still nothing. The glow of the laptop screen reflected off his face. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, eyes fixed on whatever numbers or contracts or empire-building nonsense was more important than his daughter freezing to death. Talia's vision went red. She slammed her palm against the window hard enough to hurt. "Open the damn window!" That got his attention. The man's head snapped up, his expression shifting from irritation to confusion to something that might have been alarm when he saw the fury on Talia's face. The window rolled down 3 inches. "Can I help you?" His voice was smooth, controlled, the kind of voice used to getting its way. "Your daughter," Talia said, biting off each word, "has been sitting in the rain for 2 hours. She's 8 years old, she's in a wheelchair, and she was so cold when I found her that I thought she might die." For the first time, the man's mask slipped. His eyes widened, his gaze darting past Talia toward the spot where he'd left Sky. The wheelchair was gone. "Where is she?" His voice cracked. "Inside the diner, where she should have been 2 hours ago." Talia leaned down, her face inches from the window. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Damian Blackwell stared at her, and for a second, just a second, Talia saw something raw and human flicker across his face. Shame, maybe, or fear. But then it was gone, replaced by the smooth corporate mask. "I was in the middle of a call. I told her I'd be right back. It's been 2 hours. I didn't realize." "You didn't realize." Talia's voice was shaking now, not with cold but with rage so bright and hot she could barely contain it. "You didn't realize your child was suffering, or you didn't care." "That's not fair." "Fair," Talia laughed, sharp and bitter. "You want to talk about fair? You sit here in your heated car, closing deals and building your empire, while your daughter sits in the freezing rain wondering if you're ever coming back. You know what she asked me? She asked if you love her. And I didn't know what to tell her because a man who loves his daughter doesn't leave her in a wheelchair in the middle of a storm." Damian flinched like she'd slapped him. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I didn't mean... I lost track of time. The deal was... I don't care about your deal." Talia stepped back from the car, her arms wrapped around herself, suddenly aware that she was soaked through and shivering. "Your daughter is inside. She's warm and fed and safe, and she's going to stay that way until I'm convinced you remember she exists. So you can sit out here and finish whatever the hell is more important than her, or you can come inside and be her father. Your choice." She turned and walked back to the diner without waiting for a response. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely grab the door handle, but she managed it, stepping back into the warmth and letting the door swing shut behind her. Sky was still huddled by the radiator, wrapped in towels, clutching the mug of hot chocolate like a lifeline. Her eyes found Talia's immediately, wide and fearful. "Is he mad?" Talia crossed the diner and knelt down beside her. "No, sweetheart. He's not mad. He's—" She paused, searching for the right words. "He's thinking about what matters." Sky's expression didn't change. She'd heard promises before. Talia reached out and tucked a strand of wet hair behind the girl's ear. "You know what? How about we don't worry about him right now? How about you tell me something good? What's your favorite thing in the whole world?" Sky blinked, clearly not expecting the question. "My favorite thing? Yeah. Could be anything. A food, a place, a person. Something that makes you happy." The girl thought about it for a long moment, her brow furrowed. "Books," she said finally. "I like books, especially the ones with dragons." "Dragons, huh? That's cool. What's the best dragon book you've ever read?" And just like that, Sky started talking. Slowly at first, her words halting and uncertain, but then faster, with more confidence, describing a book about a girl who found a dragon egg in her backyard and raised the baby dragon in secret. Her whole face changed when she talked about it, her eyes brighter, her shoulders less hunched, her voice stronger. Talia listened, asking questions, encouraging her, letting the story unfold. Behind her, she heard the bell above the door jangle softly, felt the cold air rush in, but she didn't turn around. She kept her focus on Sky, on this fragile, fierce little girl who'd been invisible for so long she'd almost disappeared. "Sky!" The girl's voice cut off mid-sentence. Her whole body went rigid, her eyes fixed on something behind Talia. Talia turned. Damian Blackwell stood just inside the door, rain dripping from his dark hair, his suit jacket soaked through, his expression somewhere between devastated and terrified. He looked smaller than he had in the car, younger, more human, stripped of whatever armor wealth usually provided. "Sky, His voice broke. He tried again. "I'm so sorry." Sky didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at him with those huge, wounded eyes. Damien took a step forward, then stopped, like he wasn't sure he had the right. "I lost track of time. I know that's not an excuse. I know I messed up. But I need you to know. I never meant to leave you out there. I never meant to hurt you." Silence. The radiator hissed. Old Pete shifted uncomfortably in his booth. "Do you think my dad loves me?" Sky's question from earlier echoed in Talia's mind, and she saw the same question now written all over the girl's face as she stared at her father. Damien seemed to hear it too. He crossed the diner in 3 long strides and dropped to his knees in front of his daughter's wheelchair, his hands reaching out to grip the armrests on either side of her. "I love you more than anything in this world," he said, and his voice was raw, stripped bare. "I know I don't show it. I know I've been failing you, but you are the only thing that matters. Not the deals, not the company. You, just you." Sky's lower lip trembled. "Then why do you always leave?" "Because I'm scared." The admission seemed to cost him everything. "Your mom, when she died, I didn't know how to be your dad without her. I didn't know how to be anything, so I buried myself in work because that was the only thing I knew how to do. And I told myself I was doing it for you, building the company, securing your future. But the truth is I was just running away from how much it hurt to lose her. And in running away from that pain, I left you alone. And that," his voice cracked again, "that is the worst thing I've ever done." Talia's throat tightened. She started to stand, to give them privacy, but Sky's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. "Stay," the girl whispered. "Please." So Talia stayed, sinking back into the chair, her presence a silent anchor while father and daughter stared at each other across a chasm of hurt and neglect that might be too wide to cross. "I don't need a future," Sky said. and her voice was stronger now, clearer. I need a dad, right now. Not someday when the company's bigger or the deal's done. Now. Damien closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were wet. You're right. You're absolutely right. And I'm going to do better, starting right now, I promise you. You promised before. I know. He didn't look away, didn't make excuses. I know I did, and I broke that promise, and I'll probably mess up again because I'm not perfect and I'm still learning how to do this. But I'm asking you to give me another chance, not because I deserve it, but because I love you and I want to be the father you need. Sky's face twisted with emotion, anger, hurt, longing, fear, all of it tangled together. Talia squeezed her hand gently, offering what comfort she could. Finally, Sky spoke. Okay. It was just one word, barely audible, but Damien sagged forward like a puppet with cut strings. Okay, he echoed. Thank you. Thank you. He looked up at Talia then, and the gratitude in his eyes was so intense she had to look away. Thank you, he said again. For taking care of her. For everything. Talia shrugged, uncomfortable with the weight of his attention. I didn't do anything special. I just did what anyone would do. No, Damien's voice was firm. Most people would have walked past, or called the police and washed their hands of it. You didn't. You ran into the rain. You brought her inside. You fed her and warmed her and made her feel safe. That's not nothing. That's everything. Talia didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Damien straightened, running a hand through his wet hair. I need to get Sky home. Get her into dry clothes. Make sure she's really okay. He paused. But I'd like to come back tomorrow to thank you properly. You don't need to. Please. The word was quiet but insistent. Let me do this. Let me at least try to make this right. Talia looked at Sky, who was watching her father with an expression that was almost hopeful. Almost. All right, Talia said. Tomorrow. Damien nodded. He moved behind Sky's wheelchair, and she let him wrap another towel around her shoulders, let him push her toward the door. But just before they stepped outside, Sky twisted in her seat and looked back at Talia. Will you still be here? Tomorrow? I'll be here, Talia promised. I'm here every day. Sky smiled then, a small, fragile thing that didn't quite reach her eyes, but it was real. And then they were gone, the door swinging shut behind them, the bell jangling one last time. Talia stood in the empty diner, dripping rainwater onto the tile floor, her body finally registering the cold and the exhaustion and the adrenaline crash. Marcus emerged from the kitchen, holding out a towel. You okay? Yeah. Talia took the towel and pressed it against her face, letting it absorb the moisture she couldn't quite name as rain or tears. Yeah, I think so. That was Damien Blackwell. I know. The billionaire. I know. And you just tore him a new one in the middle of the street. Yeah. Talia lowered the towel and looked at Marcus. Is that a problem? Marcus grinned. Hell no, that's the most entertainment I've had all month. You're a badass, Talia. She laughed, surprising herself. I'm something. You're something good, Marcus corrected. And that kid, she's lucky you were here. Talia thought about Sky's question. Do you think my dad loves me? And the way Damien had looked when he realized what he'd done. She thought about the promises people make and break, the ways love gets lost in the noise of ambition and fear. I hope so, she said quietly. I really hope so. She finished her shift, locked up the diner, and caught the last bus home. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city washed clean and smelling of ozone. Talia pressed her forehead against the cold window and watched Chicago blur past, her mind replaying the night over and over. A child left in the rain. A father who'd forgotten to look. And Talia, caught between them, wondering if one act of kindness was enough to break a pattern of neglect. She didn't have an answer, but tomorrow, Damien would come back. And maybe, just maybe, that would be a start. Talia woke the next morning to her alarm screaming at 5:30 a.m., the sound drilling into her skull like a punishment for crimes she couldn't remember committing. She slapped at her phone until it went silent, then lay there staring at the water-stained ceiling of her studio apartment, her body refusing to cooperate with the demands of another shift. Every muscle ached. Her feet throbbed. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small girl's voice whispered the question that had haunted her dreams all night. "Do you think my dad loves me?" She forced herself upright, swung her legs over the side of the mattress that sat directly on the floor because she couldn't afford a bed frame, and shuffled to the bathroom. The mirror showed exactly what she expected: dark circles under her eyes, her brown skin looking dull and tired, her hair a mess of curls that would take 20 minutes to tame into something presentable. She didn't have 20 minutes. She had 12, and half of that would be spent making instant coffee and shoving a granola bar into her mouth while she hunted for clean socks. By 6:15, she was on the bus, her waitressing uniform pressed but wrinkled in places no iron could reach, her mind already running through the morning routine at Rosie's. Prep the coffee station, check the condiment bottles, make sure Marcus hadn't burned through all the bacon the night before. Simple tasks. Familiar. The kind of work that let her autopilot through the hours while her brain chewed on bigger problems, like whether Damian Blackwell would actually show up today, or if last night had been nothing but guilt and rain talking. The morning shift passed in the usual blur of breakfast orders and coffee refills, and trying to smile at customers who treated her like furniture that occasionally brought food. By 10 a.m., the rush had died down to a trickle, and Talia found herself wiping down tables that were already clean, her eyes drifting to the door every few minutes, even though she'd told herself not to expect anything. Then, at 10:47 exactly, a black town car pulled up outside the diner. Talia's heart kicked against her ribs. She set down her rag and straightened, watching as the driver, a broad-shouldered man in a dark suit, got out and opened the rear passenger door. Damian emerged first, looking nothing like the rain-soaked, devastated man from last night. Today he wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Talia made in 6 months, his dark hair perfectly styled, his expression controlled and unreadable behind expensive sunglasses. Then the driver moved to the other side of the car and carefully lifted Sky's wheelchair out of the trunk, unfolding it with practiced efficiency before helping the girl transfer from the car seat. Sky wore a soft pink sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, her face serious and watchful as her father approached and took control of the wheelchair. Talia met them at the door, holding it open. "Good morning." "Good morning," Damian said, and there was something tentative in his voice, like he wasn't sure of his welcome. "Thank you for seeing us." "I said I'd be here." Talia stepped back, letting them enter. The few customers scattered around the diner looked up with interest, their conversations dropping to whispers. Damian Blackwell wasn't exactly a regular sight at Rosie's. Sky's eyes found Talia immediately, and her serious expression cracked into something that might have been relief. "Hi." "Hi, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" "Better. Dad made me stay home from school today. He said I needed to rest." "That sounds smart." Talia led them to the same corner booth from last night, the one near the radiator. Damian maneuvered the wheelchair into position, then hesitated, like he wasn't sure whether he was supposed to sit or stand. "Coffee?" Talia offered. "Please. Black." He slid into the booth across from Sky, his movements precise and controlled, but Talia noticed the way his hands weren't quite steady when he folded them on the table. She returned a moment later with coffee for him, orange juice for Sky, and a plate of fresh cinnamon rolls that Marcus had just pulled from the oven. She set them down and started to step back, but Damian spoke before she could retreat. "Will you sit with us? Please?" Talia glanced around the diner. It was slow enough that she could spare a few minutes. She grabbed a chair from a nearby table and sat, her posture careful, her hands folded in her lap. Damian took a sip of his coffee, set it down, and looked at her directly. "I came here to say thank you, properly. What you did last night, pulling Sky out of the rain, taking care of her, making her feel safe, that was extraordinary. And I'm grateful. More grateful than I know how to express." "You already thanked me last night," Talia said quietly. "You don't need to keep doing it." "I think I do." Damian's jaw tightened. "I think I need to acknowledge what happened, not just the rescue, but the fact that it needed to happen at all. I failed my daughter, spectacularly, and you, a stranger, stepped in and did what I should have been doing all along." Sky was watching him with wide eyes, her orange juice forgotten. Here's what I want to propose, Damien continued, and now his voice took on the tone of someone used to making deals, someone who'd thought this through. I'd like to offer you a job at my company, Blackwell Technologies. Talia blinked. Of all the things she'd expected him to say, that wasn't on the list. Excuse me? I need someone on my team who understands people, really understands them. Not the way executives understand market demographics, but the way you understood that Sky needed help before she could even ask for it. He leaned forward slightly. I've built a company worth billions, but I've realized, especially in the last 12 hours, that I've surrounded myself with people who only know how to see numbers and projections. Nobody on my staff would have done what you did. They would have called security, or made it someone else's problem, or worse, they wouldn't have noticed at all. Mr. Blackwell. Damien, please. Damien. Talia felt off balance, like the floor had tilted without warning. I appreciate the offer, but I'm a waitress. I don't know anything about technology or corporate culture or whatever it is you do. I'm not looking for another tech expert. I have hundreds of those. I'm looking for someone who can read a room, who can see what people need, who can build trust. Those are skills you can't teach in business school. He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. I'm offering you a position as Director of Community Engagement. You'd work with our HR department, our public relations team, and directly with me on initiatives that connect the company to the communities we serve. Starting salary is $200,000 a year, full benefits, and a signing bonus of $50,000. The numbers hit Talia like a physical blow. $200,000. She made $23,000 last year, and that was with overtime. The signing bonus alone was more money than she'd seen in her entire adult life. Her voice came out hoarse. She cleared her throat. That's incredibly generous, but it's not generous, Damien interrupted. It's strategic. I'm not offering this out of guilt or charity. I'm offering it because I think you'd be exceptional at the job, and because my company needs what you can bring to it. Talia looked at Sky, who was staring at her with an expression of desperate hope, like she was afraid Talia might disappear if she said no. Can I think about it? Damien nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need, but I hope you'll seriously consider it. He stood, pulling out his wallet and leaving $200 bills on the table. For the coffee and the cinnamon rolls, keep the change. That's too much. It's not enough. He moved behind Sky's wheelchair. We should go. I have a meeting at noon, but after that I'm taking the rest of the day off. Sky and I are going to the aquarium. Sky's face lit up. Really? Really. I promised you I'd do better, and that starts with actually spending time with you. No phone, no laptop, just us. The girl's smile was so bright it made Talia's chest ache. She watched them leave, Damien pushing the wheelchair carefully through the door while the driver held it open, and then they were gone, the town car pulling away from the curb and disappearing into traffic. Marcus appeared at her elbow, wiping his hands on his apron. Did that just happen? I think so. Talia picked up Damien's business card, running her thumb over the embossed letters. I think maybe it did. You gonna take the job? I don't know. It's crazy, right? I can't just... I don't have the qualifications. I barely finished community college. So what? The man offered you $200,000. That's life-changing money, Talia. I know, that's what scares me. She tucked the card into her apron pocket. What if I'm terrible at it? What if I get there and everyone realizes I don't belong and I end up embarrassing myself and him? Or, Marcus said gently, what if you're amazing at it? What if this is exactly the break you've been waiting for? Talia didn't have an answer to that, so she went back to work, but the card in her pocket felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric. 3 days later, she called the number on the card. The woman who answered had a voice like silk over steel. Mr. Blackwell's office, this is Patricia speaking. Hi, my name is Talia Reed. Damien, Mr. Blackwell, gave me this number and said I could call if I wanted to discuss the job offer. Oh, Ms. Reed, yes, Mr. Blackwell has been expecting your call. Can you hold for just a moment? Before Talia could answer, the line went silent, except for classical music that probably cost more to license than her monthly rent. Then, after what felt like an eternity but was probably 30 seconds, Damien's voice came through. Talia, I'm glad you called. I've been thinking about your offer. And? She took a breath. I want to say yes, but I need to understand something first. Why me? Really? Not the corporate answer about community engagement, but the real reason. There was a pause. When Damien spoke again, his voice was quieter, more honest. Because when I look at you, I see someone who hasn't forgotten what it's like to struggle. Someone who still notices when people are hurting. I've spent the last 15 years building an empire, and somewhere along the way I stopped seeing individuals. They became metrics, data points, human resources. But you saw my daughter when I couldn't. And if you can help me build a company that doesn't lose sight of people the way I lost sight of Sky, then that's worth every penny I'm offering you. Talia closed her eyes. Okay. I'll take the job. But I have conditions. Name them. I need 2 weeks to give proper notice at the diner. I'm not leaving Marcus and the team in the lurch. And I need help finding professional clothes because everything I own comes from Target, and I'm pretty sure that's not going to cut it in your boardroom. She could hear the smile in his voice. Done. Patricia will coordinate everything. Welcome to Blackwell Technologies, Ms. Reed. Talia, please. Welcome to the team, Talia. 2 weeks turned out to be barely enough time to process the seismic shift her life was taking. Marcus threw her a going-away party on her last shift, complete with a cake that read, "From waitress to executive," in shaky frosting letters, and half the regular customers showed up to wish her well. Old Pete cried, which made Talia cry, which made Marcus threaten to ban crying from his diner because it was bad for business. Patricia, Damien's assistant, turned out to be a force of nature, wrapped in designer suits and armed with a scheduling system that could probably run a small government. She arranged for Talia to meet with a personal shopper who helped her assemble a professional wardrobe, sent over boxes of materials about the company for her to study, and scheduled her first day for a Monday morning at 8 a.m. sharp. The night before she started, Talia couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through 1,000 catastrophic scenarios. What if she couldn't do the job? What if the other executives hated her? What if Damien realized he'd made a terrible mistake and fired her within a week? At 6 a.m., she gave up on sleep and started getting ready. She showered, dried her hair, put on more makeup than she'd worn in years, and pulled on the first outfit from her new wardrobe, a navy blue dress with a fitted blazer and heels that made her 3 inches taller but also made her feet hurt within 5 minutes. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She took the train downtown, her hands clutching a leather portfolio Patricia had sent over, her stomach twisted in knots. The Blackwell Technologies building was a steel and glass tower that stretched 40 stories into the Chicago sky, the kind of building Talia had walked past 100 times without ever imagining she'd be inside it. The lobby was all polished marble and modern art, with a massive reception desk staffed by 2 young women who looked like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Talia approached on shaking legs. "Hi, I'm Talia Reed. It's my first day and I'm supposed to—" "Ms. Reed. Yes, we've been expecting you." The receptionist smiled warmly. "Mr. Blackwell asked me to send you straight up to the executive floor. That's the 40th floor. The elevator on the right will take you directly there." "Thank you." Talia's voice came out steadier than she felt. She crossed to the elevator, stepped inside, and pressed the button for 40. The doors closed, and she was suddenly alone with her reflection in the polished steel walls and the rising panic in her chest. The elevator ride felt both too long and too short. When the doors opened, she stepped out into a reception area that was somehow even more intimidating than the lobby. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Chicago, the lake stretching out blue and endless to the east. A curved desk dominated the space, and behind it sat Patricia, looking effortlessly elegant in a cream-colored suit. "Ms. Reed, welcome. Let me show you to your office, and then Mr. Blackwell would like to see you for a brief orientation." Talia followed Patricia down a hallway lined with offices, each one occupied by people who looked busy and important and nothing like her. They stopped at a door near the end of the hall, and Patricia pushed it open. "This is yours. I've had it set up your computer and phone. If you need anything else, just let me know." The office was bigger than Talia's entire apartment. It had a desk, a sitting area with a leather couch, built-in bookshelves, and windows that offered a view of the city that made her dizzy. "This can't be right," Talia said faintly. "This is too much." All the directors have similar offices, Patricia assured her. Now, if you'll follow me, Mr. Blackwell is ready for you. They walked to the corner office at the end of the hall, and Patricia knocked once before opening the door. Damien's office was even larger than Talia's, dominated by a massive desk and a conference table that could seat 12. Damien stood by the windows, phone pressed to his ear, but he ended the call as soon as he saw her. Talia, good morning. How are you feeling? Terrified, she admitted. He smiled. Good. That means you're taking it seriously. Come, sit. He gestured to the conference table, and they both sat. I want to give you a realistic picture of what you're walking into. Blackwell Technologies has about 3,000 employees. We develop software solutions for enterprise clients, everything from data analytics to AI integration. It's highly competitive, fast-paced, and frankly, it can be brutal. The culture here has been built around one thing, winning. That's served us well financially, but it's also created some problems. What kind of problems? High turnover, burnout, a toxic competitiveness that's starting to hurt collaboration, and a disturbing lack of diversity in our leadership team. He folded his hands on the table. I've been CEO for 12 years, and until a few days ago, I thought those were acceptable trade-offs for success. Then I left my daughter in the rain for 2 hours, and a waitress had to teach me how to be human again. That was my wake-up call. So here's what I need from you. I need you to help me build a better culture, one that doesn't sacrifice people on the altar of profit, one that actually values the humans behind the work. Talia absorbed this. That's a tall order. I know, and you won't be able to do it alone. I've already spoken to our head of HR, Karen Matthews. She'll be your primary partner in this work. I've also arranged for you to have lunch with our executive team today so they can meet you. Today? Talia's pulse spiked. As in a few hours from now? Is that a problem? I thought I'd have some time to settle in first, maybe learn how things work before I meet everyone. If I've learned anything in business, it's that there's never a perfect time. Better to dive in. He stood, signaling the meeting was over. Patricia has your schedule. Your first official task is to review our current community outreach programs and identify gaps. I want a preliminary report by Friday. Friday? That's 4 days away. You'll do fine. Damien walked her to the door. And Talia? Thank you for being here. I meant what I said. I think you're going to change this place. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But as she walked back to her office and sat down at her massive desk and stared at the computer screen that required a password she didn't have yet, all she could think was that she had no idea what she was doing. The morning passed in a blur of IT tutorials, paperwork, and Patricia appearing every 20 minutes with something new Talia needed to sign or read or understand. By noon, her head was spinning and she hadn't eaten anything since a granola bar at 6 a.m. Then Patricia appeared in her doorway with a tight smile. Ms. Reed, the executive lunch is in conference room A. I'll walk you there. Talia's stomach dropped. She'd almost managed to forget about the lunch. Almost. Conference room A turned out to be a sleek space with a long table already set with salads, sandwiches, and bottles of sparkling water. 7 people were already seated, their conversations dying as Talia entered. Damien sat at the head of the table, and he gestured to the empty chair on his right. Everyone, this is Talia Reed, our new Director of Community Engagement. Talia, let me introduce you to the team. He went around the table, naming names and titles that immediately blurred together in Talia's mind. There was Karen from HR, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a kind smile. David, the CFO, who looked at Talia like he was already calculating her cost-benefit ratio. Jennifer, the COO, who barely looked up from her phone. And then there was Richard Chen, the VP of Operations, who leaned back in his chair and regarded Talia with an expression that was somewhere between amusement and disdain. So, Richard said, his voice casual, but with an edge underneath. Director of Community Engagement. That's a new position, isn't it? It is, Damien confirmed. Interesting timing. We're in the middle of Q4, pushing for year-end targets, and you're creating a new executive role focused on what exactly? Community feelings. A few uncomfortable laughs rippled around the table. Talia felt heat creep up her neck, but she forced herself to meet Richard's gaze steadily. I'm here to help ensure that as Blackwell Technologies grows, we don't lose sight of the human impact of our work, she said, surprised by how calm her voice sounded. That includes our employees, the communities where we operate, and the clients we serve. Noble, Richard said, and the word dripped with condescension. But how exactly does that translate to business value? Can you quantify the ROI on human impact? Richard, Damien's voice was quiet but carried a warning. No, it's a fair question, Talia said. She set down her fork, buying herself a moment to think. You're right that you can't put a simple number on human value, but you can measure turnover costs, recruitment expenses, lawsuit settlements, brand reputation damage, and lost productivity from toxic work environments. All of those have very clear financial impacts. If I can help reduce those costs while building a culture that attracts and retains top talent, that's ROI. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Impressive answer. Very rehearsed. Actually, I came up with it just now. Talia picked up her fork again. But I'm glad it sounds polished. This time the laugh was genuine, coming from Karen, who raised her water bottle in a small salute. I like her already. The rest of the lunch was less confrontational, though Talia could feel Richard's eyes on her throughout, assessing, calculating, waiting for her to slip. By the time she escaped back to her office, she was exhausted, and it wasn't even 1 p.m. She spent the afternoon trying to make sense of the materials Patricia had provided about existing community programs. It quickly became clear that community engagement at Blackwell Technologies mostly meant token donations to charity and hosting an annual volunteer day where executives showed up at a food bank for 2 hours to get photos for the company website. There was nothing systemic, nothing sustainable, nothing that actually addressed the concerns Damien had raised about culture and values. She was deep in a document about their diversity hiring statistics, which were abysmal, when someone knocked on her doorframe. She looked up to find Richard Chen standing there, his expression unreadable. Got a minute? Every instinct told her to say no, but she nodded. Sure. He came in and closed the door behind him, which immediately put her on alert. He didn't sit, just leaned against her bookshelf with his arms crossed. I wanted to apologize for lunch. I came across as hostile, and that wasn't professional. It's fine, Talia said carefully. No, it's not. But I want to be honest with you about something. Richard straightened. You're walking into a political minefield. Damien created this position on a whim because he had a personal crisis. That's not how executive decisions are supposed to work. It sets a dangerous precedent, and it's going to create resentment among people who've worked their way up through the ranks for years. Are you one of those people? I'm one of many. He moved closer to her desk. I'm not trying to be your enemy, Talia. I'm trying to give you fair warning. The executive team is watching you very closely. Any mistake, any misstep, any sign that Damien's faith was misplaced, and they'll move to have you removed. And there's nothing he'll be able to do about it, because even a CEO can only protect someone for so long before it starts damaging his own credibility. Talia's mouth was dry. Why are you telling me this? Because believe it or not, I don't want to see you fail. I think Damien's instinct about the culture problem is correct, even if I think his solution was impulsive. But if you're going to survive here, you need to understand the game you're playing, and you need to decide very quickly whether you're willing to play it. He didn't wait for a response. He just nodded once and left, closing the door quietly behind him. Talia sat in the silence of her too-big office, staring at the closed door, feeling the weight of Richard's words settle over her like a wet blanket. She'd known this would be hard. She'd expected resistance. But she hadn't quite grasped that she was walking into an environment where her failure wasn't just anticipated, it was desired. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Mr. Blackwell would like to see you before you leave for the day. Talia checked the time. 4:47 p.m. She gathered her things and walked to Damien's office, her new heels clicking against the polished floor in a rhythm that sounded too confident for how she felt. Patricia waved her in without preamble, and Talia found Damien at his desk, tie loosened, reading glasses perched on his nose, looking more human than he had all day. Close the door, he said without looking up. She did, then sat in the chair across from his desk without being invited. He looked up at that, one eyebrow raised, but something that might have been approval flickered across his face. How was your first day? Honestly, it was like being thrown into the deep end of a pool filled with sharks. That's an accurate assessment of this place. He set down his glasses. Richard talked to you. It wasn't a question. How did you know? Because he does this with every new executive hire. Tries to establish dominance, test for weakness, determine whether they're a threat or an ally. What did he say? Talia debated lying, then decided if she was going to fail, she might as well fail honestly. He said, I'm walking into a political minefield, that the executive team is waiting for me to mess up so they can push me out, that even you won't be able to protect me if I don't prove myself quickly. He's right. The blunt confirmation hit like a slap. Talia stared at him. That's it? That's all you have to say? What do you want me to say? That it's going to be easy? That everyone will welcome you with open arms? Damien leaned forward. I brought you into a toxic environment, Talia. One that I allowed to develop over years of prioritizing growth over everything else. The people on my executive team got there by being ruthless, by outmaneuvering their competition, by proving they could win at any cost. They're not going to roll over for you just because I gave you a title in a corner office. Then why did you bring me here? If you knew it was going to be this hard, why offer me the job at all? Because I need someone who'll fight for what's right, even when it's hard. Someone who won't get seduced by the power and money into becoming another Richard Chen. I've seen what you're capable of, Talia. You stood up to me in the middle of a storm and told me I was failing my daughter. If you can do that, you can handle a few hostile executives. Talia stood, her hands gripping the arms of the chair. You're asking me to fight a war. I don't know how to win. I'm asking you to be exactly who you were the night we met. The person who saw what needed to be done and did it, consequences be damned. He stood as well, moving around the desk to face her. I believe in you. The question is whether you believe in yourself. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to feel the confidence he seemed to have in her, but all she felt was the crushing weight of expectations she had no idea how to meet. I need to go, she said quietly. I'll see you tomorrow. She left before he could respond, walking quickly past Patricia into the elevator, through the lobby, and out onto the street where the evening rush hour crowd swallowed her whole. She walked for blocks without really seeing where she was going, her mind churning. Finally, her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but something made her answer. Hello? Talia, it's Sky. All the tension in Talia's shoulders loosened at once. Hey, sweetheart, how are you? Good. Dad's phone has your number in it, so I called. Is that okay? Of course it's okay. I'm glad you did. How was your first day? Talia laughed, the sound slightly bitter. It was educational. That bad, huh? There was wisdom in Sky's voice that didn't belong to an 8-year-old, the kind that came from watching adults struggle and fail. It wasn't terrible, just harder than I expected. Dad says hard things are usually worth doing. Your dad's pretty smart. Sometimes. Sky paused. He's been different since that night. Better. He came home early today and we had dinner together. He helped me with my homework and he didn't look at his phone once. That's really good, Sky. I think it's because of you. I think you reminded him that I exist. Talia's throat tightened. You always existed, sweetheart. He just forgot how to see you for a while. Will you forget too, now that you work there? The question landed like a punch. No, I promise you I won't forget. Okay. Sky's voice brightened slightly. I should go. Dad's calling me for dessert, but Talia? Yeah? Thank you for everything. The line went dead before Talia could respond. She stood on the sidewalk, commuters flowing past her like water around a stone, and felt something shift inside her chest. Richard was right. This was a political minefield. Damien was right. It was going to be brutal. But Sky was also right. Hard things were usually worth doing, and if nothing else, she'd promised an 8-year-old girl she wouldn't forget. That seemed like reason enough to show up tomorrow and fight. Talia showed up the next morning with her shoulders squared and her chin up, determined to prove that neither Richard's warnings nor the executive team's skepticism would break her. She'd spent half the night reading through company reports, and the other half reminding herself that she'd survived worse than hostile boardrooms. Growing up poor in Chicago, working 3 jobs to pay for community college, watching her mother die slowly because they couldn't afford decent health care. Those things had forged something hard and unbreakable in her core. A few executives in expensive suits didn't scare her. Not really. But 3 weeks into the job, she was beginning to understand that there were different kinds of warfare, and corporate politics was a slow-bleeding kind that wore you down in ways physical hardship never could. The resistance wasn't dramatic. Nobody openly challenged her in meetings or sent nasty emails. Instead, it was death by 1,000 small cuts. Calendar invites that somehow never reached her inbox. Conference calls that got rescheduled without notice. Budget requests that disappeared into bureaucratic black holes. People who smiled to her face and then went silent when she asked direct questions. Karen from HR was the exception. She'd taken Talia under her wing with the fierce protectiveness of someone who'd also been underestimated and had survived to tell the tale. They met for coffee every morning at 7, before the office filled with people and politics, and Karen taught Talia the unwritten rules that nobody put in the employee handbook. "You need to understand something," Karen said one morning, stirring sugar into her coffee with methodical precision. "Damien brought you in to fix a culture problem, but half the executives don't think there is a culture problem. They think there's a sensitivity problem. They think the issue is that people aren't tough enough to handle the pressure, not that the pressure itself might be toxic. So they see me as the enemy. They see you as proof that Damien's gone soft, which makes you a threat to the way things have always been done." Karen looked up, her gaze sharp. "Richard's the one you need to watch most carefully. He's been angling for COO for 2 years, but Jennifer has that spot locked down. He sees your sudden appearance as evidence that merit doesn't matter anymore, that Damien's making emotional decisions instead of strategic ones. Is he wrong? About Damien hiring you emotionally? Maybe a little, but that doesn't mean you're not the right person for the job." Karen reached across the table and squeezed Talia's hand. "I've been here 15 years. I've watched 3 CEOs cycle through, and I've seen what happens when companies prioritize profit over people. It destroys them from the inside out. Damien's finally seen that. Don't let Richard or anyone else convince you that caring about human beings is weakness." Talia held on to those words like a lifeline as the days bled into weeks, and the resistance continued. She threw herself into the work, determined to prove her value through results. She redesigned the company's volunteer program, expanding it from 1 day a year to ongoing partnerships with local organizations. She launched an internal survey to assess employee satisfaction and got a response rate that shocked everyone. 73% participation and a comment section filled with honest, sometimes brutal feedback about what it was really like to work at Blackwell Technologies. The data was damning. 68% of employees reported feeling burned out. 42% had considered leaving in the past year. Women and people of color reported significantly lower satisfaction scores and described a culture where mistakes weren't tolerated and asking for help was seen as weakness. Talia compiled everything into a presentation and scheduled a meeting with Damien. She found him in his office late one evening, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled up, looking at spreadsheets that probably represented millions of dollars in quarterly projections. "Got a minute?" she asked from the doorway. He looked up and something in his expression softened. "For you?" "Always." "Come in." She sat across from him and opened her laptop, pulling up the survey results. "I need to show you something, and you're not going to like it." For the next 20 minutes, she walked him through the data, watching his face grow progressively darker as the numbers told their story. When she finished, he sat back in his chair and was quiet for so long she started to worry. "Say something," she finally prompted. "I knew it was bad," he said quietly. "I didn't know it was this bad." "The good news is that people responded. That means they still have hope that things can change. If they'd really given up, they wouldn't have bothered filling out the survey." "What do you recommend?" Talia took a breath. This was the moment she'd been building toward, the point where she either proved Karen's faith was justified or confirmed Richard's suspicions. "I recommend we present these findings to the full executive team, not as an accusation, but as a baseline. Then we work together to develop concrete action steps with measurable outcomes and timelines for implementation." "They're going to fight you on this." "I know." "Richard especially. These numbers make his division look terrible." "The numbers make everyone look terrible. That's kind of the point." Talia closed her laptop. but we can't fix what we won't acknowledge. And right now, you've got a company full of talented people who are being ground down by a system that treats them like machines. That's not sustainable, Damien. Eventually, either they'll break or they'll leave. Either way, you lose. He nodded slowly. Schedule the meeting. Full executive team. Next week. Next week? That's not enough time, I know. But if we wait, Richard and the others will have time to prepare their defenses. Better to hit them while the data is fresh. He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the city lights stretching to the horizon. You know they're going to come after you, right? The moment you present these findings, you're painting a target on your back. I figured. And you're doing it anyway. Someone has to. Talia stood as well. Besides, what's the worst they can do? Fire me? I've been fired before. I'll survive. Damien turned to look at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. You're braver than you think you are. Or dumber. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. He laughed, and the sound was genuine. Fair point. Go home, Talia. Get some rest. You're going to need it. She left feeling both terrified and exhilarated, the kind of buzzing energy that came from knowing you were about to jump off a cliff and had no idea if you'd packed a parachute. Patricia had already scheduled the executive meeting for Tuesday at 9 a.m., which gave Talia exactly 5 days to prepare for what would probably be the most important presentation of her life. She spent the weekend in her apartment, surrounded by printouts and coffee cups, building a presentation that was data-driven but also human, that told the story behind the numbers. She included anonymous quotes from the survey, raw, honest voices describing what it felt like to work in an environment where excellence was expected, but humanity was optional. Monday morning, she did a dry run with Karen, who listened intently and then offered one critical piece of advice. Don't apologize, Karen said. Not once. Don't say sorry for the bad news or unfortunately or any other qualifier that sounds like you're asking permission to tell the truth. These are facts. Present them as such. What if they attack the methodology? Question the validity? Then you calmly explain your methodology and remind them that 73% response rate is considered excellent in employee surveys. But Talia? They're not going to attack the data. They're going to attack you. The words sat heavy in Talia's stomach all through Monday afternoon and into Tuesday morning as she dressed in her most professional suit, charcoal gray, sharply tailored, armor disguised as business attire. She arrived at the office at 7:30, went straight to the conference room, and set up her presentation. Then she stood at the window, watching the city wake up below, and tried to remember why she'd thought she could do this. The executives filtered in over the next 20 minutes. Jennifer arrived first, phone glued to her ear, barely acknowledging Talia's presence. David came next, looking annoyed at having his morning disrupted. Karen slipped in quietly and took a seat near the back, offering Talia a subtle nod of encouragement. Then came the others, department heads and VPs whose names Talia had finally memorized, until the only empty seat was the one next to Damien at the head of the table. Richard walked in last, exactly at 9 a.m., his timing deliberate. He took a seat across from Talia and smiled at her, the kind of smile a shark might give a wounded seal. Good morning, everyone, Damien said, calling the meeting to order. Thank you for making time. I know you're all busy, but what Talia has to share is critical to our company's future. Talia? She stood, moved to the front of the room, and clicked to the first slide. Her hands were steady. Her voice was clear. Karen's advice echoed in her mind. Don't apologize. 3 weeks ago, I launched a company-wide employee satisfaction survey. Out of 2,847 employees, 2,079 responded, a 73% response rate, which is considered excellent and indicates that people wanted their voices heard. What they told us should concern everyone in this room. She clicked to the next slide, showing the burnout statistics. Someone, she thought it was David, inhaled sharply. 68% of our employees report feeling burned out. That's not just a morale problem. It's a retention problem, a productivity problem, and frankly, a legal liability waiting to happen. Burned out employees make mistakes. They file grievances. They leave and take institutional knowledge with them. Click. Next slide. The satisfaction differential by demographic. Women at this company report 23% lower job satisfaction than men, Employees of color report 31% lower satisfaction than white employees. When asked why, the most common responses included lack of advancement opportunities, being talked over in meetings, having their ideas dismissed or attributed to others, and experiencing microaggressions that HR either didn't address or minimized. "Now wait just a minute," Richard started, but Damien held up a hand. "Let her finish." Talia met Richard's eyes and didn't blink. "I have the full data packet available if you'd like to review the methodology and raw numbers, but the story they tell is consistent. We have a culture problem. We've built an environment where people are afraid to make mistakes, afraid to ask questions, and afraid to be human. That's not a recipe for innovation, it's a recipe for attrition." She clicked through several more slides, each one landing like a hammer blow. Anonymous quotes from employees describing impossible deadlines, managers who ruled by fear, a pervasive sense that the only thing that mattered was the next quarter's numbers. By the time she reached her final slide, a list of recommended interventions, the room was thick with tension. "I'm proposing a three-phase approach," Talia continued. "Phase 1 focuses on immediate interventions. Management training on inclusive leadership, establishment of clear channels for reporting concerns without retaliation, and implementation of reasonable workload expectations. Phase 2 addresses systemic issues, revising our promotion criteria to include leadership and collaboration skills, not just individual achievement, creating mentorship programs for underrepresented employees, and conducting regular pulse surveys to track progress. Phase 3 is about culture building, celebrating failures as learning opportunities, recognizing collaborative achievements, and ensuring that our stated values actually match our daily practices." She closed her laptop and looked around the table. "I know this seems overwhelming. I know it will require significant changes to how we operate. But the alternative is watching talented people burn out or leave, defending lawsuits from employees who've been discriminated against, and ultimately losing our competitive edge because we've created an environment where only a narrow definition of success can thrive." Questions? The silence that followed was deafening. Then Richard leaned forward, his expression carefully neutral. "These are serious allegations, Talia. Accusations of discrimination, of hostile work environments. Do you understand the implications of putting this in writing and presenting it to the executive team? I understand that I'm presenting data and employee feedback, not making accusations. Data that conveniently paints everyone in this room as villains who've built a toxic company. The data doesn't mention anyone by name. It describes patterns and systems. If you're feeling accused, that might be worth examining." Several people around the table shifted uncomfortably. Richard's smile went cold. "I've been with this company for 8 years. I've helped grow revenue by 300%. I've built teams, launched products, and generated millions in profit. And now you, someone who's been here less than a month, are telling me that I've created a toxic environment? I'm telling you what your employees are saying. You can choose to hear it or dismiss it, but their experience doesn't change based on your feelings about it." "My feelings?" Richard's voice sharpened. "Let's talk about feelings. Let's talk about the fact that you were hired based on Damien's feelings after a personal crisis, not based on any actual qualifications for this role. Let's talk about how you're pushing a social agenda instead of focusing on business outcomes. Let's talk about—" "Richard," Damien's voice cut through the room like a blade. "That's enough." "Is it? Because I think someone needs to say what everyone's thinking. We're a business, not a therapy session. People are burned out. Welcome to the real world. They don't like the culture. They're free to work somewhere else. We pay top salaries and offer excellent benefits. If that's not enough, maybe they're not cut out for this level of work." "Or maybe," Karen spoke up from the back of the room, her voice calm but firm, "we've confused high performance with unsustainable pressure." I've been in HR for 15 years, and I've watched our turnover rate climb steadily. Last year alone, we spent $4.2 million in recruitment and training costs to replace people who left. If even half of those people had stayed, we'd have saved millions and retained invaluable institutional knowledge. This isn't about being soft. It's about being smart. Jennifer, who'd been silent until now, set down her phone. "I hate to say it, but Karen's right. I've lost 3 senior engineers in the past 6 months. All of them cited burnout. All of them went to competitors. That's a problem." "It's a personnel problem, not a culture problem," Richard insisted. Some people can handle the pressure and some can't. That's natural selection. Natural selection, Talia repeated slowly. Is that really how you want to describe our employment practices? It's how every successful company operates. You think Google or Amazon or Apple got where they are by coddling employees? I think they got there by attracting and retaining the best talent, which requires treating people like human beings, not expendable resources. Richard stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm not going to sit here and be lectured on business strategy by someone whose previous job was bringing people grilled cheese sandwiches. The room went dead silent. Talia felt the words hit her like a physical blow, felt the heat of humiliation rise in her cheeks. Every insecurity she'd been fighting for weeks rushed to the surface. The voice that said she didn't belong, that she was a fraud, that Richard was right, and she was just a waitress playing executive. But then she remembered Sky's face in the rain. Remembered the way the girl had asked if her father loved her. Remembered that sometimes the people with the least power saw most clearly what the people at the top had forgotten. You're right, Talia said quietly. My previous job was serving food to people who needed it. And you know what I learned doing that? I learned that everyone deserves to be treated with basic dignity. The businessman in the $1,000 suit and the construction worker in paint-stained jeans both deserved respect, good service, and acknowledgement of their humanity. That's not a radical concept. It's basic decency. And if you think that's not applicable to business, then maybe you're the one who doesn't belong in this room. Richard's face flushed dark red. How dare you? I think we should take a break, Damien said, standing. Richard, my office, now. Everyone else will reconvene in 30 minutes. He walked out without waiting for a response, and after a moment's hesitation, Richard followed. The remaining executives filed out in uncomfortable silence, leaving Talia alone with Karen. That was either very brave or very stupid, Karen said, moving to sit in the chair next to where Talia had collapsed. I'm leaning towards stupid. Talia's hands were shaking now, the adrenaline draining away and leaving her hollow. I lost my temper. I let him get to me. You stood up to a bully. That's different. Is it? Because it feels like I just committed career suicide. Karen was quiet for a moment. Do you remember what I told you the first week? About how half the executives think the problem is that people aren't tough enough? Yeah. Richard's the leader of that faction, and what you just did, refusing to back down, calling out his contempt for anyone he sees as beneath him, that's exactly the kind of challenge they've been waiting for. They wanted to see if you'd fold under pressure. You didn't. So what happens now? Now we wait and see if Damien's willing to back you up. Because if he is, you just won a major battle. And if he isn't... Karen didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The 30 minutes crawled by like hours. Talia paced the conference room, then forced herself to sit still, then gave up and went to the bathroom to splash cold water on her face. When she returned, people were filtering back in, their expressions carefully neutral. Richard came in last, his face stony, and took his seat without looking at Talia. Damien waited until everyone was settled before speaking. I've had some conversations during the break, and I want to make something very clear. Talia presented data that reflects the reality of working at this company as described by the people who actually work here. That data is not an attack, it's information, and we can either use it to improve or we can dismiss it and continue down a path that's clearly not sustainable. He looked directly at Richard. We've built a high-performing company. No one's questioning that. But high performance and human dignity are not mutually exclusive. In fact, research shows that companies with strong cultures of respect and psychological safety consistently outperform those that rely on fear and pressure. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to implement Talia's recommendations, all of them, with full executive support. Damien, Richard said, his voice tight, you can't just mandate culture change. It doesn't work that way. You're right. I can't mandate how people feel, but I can mandate how they behave, and I can make it very clear that this company's values are not optional. We value excellence, yes, but we also value respect, collaboration, and the well-being of our people. Anyone who can't operate within those parameters is free to work elsewhere. The message was clear, and everyone in the room heard it. Richard's jaw clenched, but he nodded once sharply. Good, Damien continued. Talia, work with Karen to develop an implementation timeline. I want monthly progress reports, and I want to see measurable change within the next quarter. Everyone else, you'll be responsible for ensuring your teams understand and support these initiatives. Dismissed. People filed out quickly, eager to escape the tension. Richard left without a word, his shoulders rigid. When the room was finally empty except for Talia, Damien, and Karen, Damien turned to Talia with an expression she couldn't quite read. That was a hell of a presentation. I'm sorry I lost my temper with Richard. Don't be, he needed to hear it. They all did. Damien moved closer. But you should know, you've made an enemy today, a powerful one. Richard doesn't forgive easily, and he doesn't forget. I know. Are you prepared for what that means? Talia thought about it. Thought about the survey responses from employees who'd been brave enough to tell the truth. Thought about Skye asking if her father loved her. Thought about all the times in her life when she could have stayed quiet and safe, but chose to speak up instead. Yeah, she said. I'm prepared. Damien studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, then let's get to work. Over the next few weeks, Talia threw herself into implementation with an intensity that bordered on obsession. She worked with Karen to develop training modules, restructured the feedback process, and began sitting in on department meetings to observe dynamics firsthand. The resistance didn't disappear. If anything, it went underground, became more subtle and therefore more dangerous. But there were small victories. An engineer who'd been too afraid to ask questions started speaking up in meetings. A marketing manager reported that her team seemed less stressed after they implemented mandatory no-meeting Fridays. 3 employees of color were promoted to leadership positions they'd been passed over for before. But for every step forward, there was pushback. Budget requests for diversity initiatives got mysteriously delayed. Training sessions that were supposed to be mandatory somehow didn't get scheduled for Richard's division. Talia would fix one leak only to find 2 more had sprung up somewhere else. She was working late one Thursday night, alone in her office, when her desk phone rang. She almost didn't answer. It was past 8, and everyone should have gone home. But something made her pick up. This is Talia. Ms. Reed, this is building security. We've had a report of suspicious activity in your office. Can you confirm you're working late? Talia frowned. Yes, I'm here. What kind of suspicious activity? Someone reported seeing unauthorized access to your computer. We're sending an officer up to check it out. I'm the only one here, and I'm using my computer right now, so please don't touch anything. Officer's on his way up. The line went dead before Talia could argue. A cold feeling crept up her spine. She looked around her office. Everything seemed normal. Her laptop was right where she'd left it. Her files were her files. The drawer where she kept hard copies of sensitive documents was slightly open. She never left it open. Talia stood quickly and moved to the filing cabinet. Inside, folders were askew, pages sticking out at odd angles like someone had rifled through them and hastily tried to cover their tracks. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Heavy footsteps approached, and a security guard appeared in her doorway. He was young, maybe mid-20s, and looked uncomfortable. Ms. Reed, I need you to step away from the cabinet, please. Someone was in my office. Someone went through my files. Ma'am, I need you to step away. Now. Something in his tone made her comply. She backed up, hands raised slightly. The guard moved past her and examined the filing cabinet, then pulled out his radio. This is Matthews. I need someone from IT and the head of security up on 40 immediately. Within 10 minutes, Talia's office was full of people. Patrick Mills, the head of security, examined her computer while an IT specialist checked the access logs. Karen arrived, looking worried, followed shortly by Damien, still in his suit despite the late hour. What's going on? Damien demanded. That's what we're trying to determine, Patrick said. He looked at Talia. Ms. Reed, when did you last access these files? This afternoon, around 3. I locked my office when I went to a meeting at 4, came back at 5:30, and I've been here since. And the filing cabinet? Locked. It's always locked. The key's on my keyring, and the keyring was in my purse. The IT specialist looked up from the computer, his face grim. Mr. Blackwell, You need to see this. They all crowded around the screen. The specialist pulled up the access log, pointing to several entries timestamped between 4:15 and 5 p.m. Someone logged into this computer using Ms. Reed's credentials and accessed several confidential files. Employee records, survey data, preliminary reports. Then they copied everything to an external drive. That's not possible, Talia said. I was in a meeting. My computer was locked. Someone had your password. I didn't give anyone my password. Did you write it down anywhere? Leave it in a drawer? No, I use a password manager. It's encrypted. Patrick exchanged a look with Damien. This is looking more like a targeted breach than opportunistic theft. Someone wanted specific information from Ms. Reed's files, and they knew exactly when she'd be away from her office. Who knew about your 4 o'clock meeting? Damien asked Talia. She thought back. It was a training session. Calendar invite went out to about 20 people, but anyone could have seen it on my calendar if they looked. We need to review security footage, Patrick said. See who accessed this floor during that window. Do that. And Patrick? This stays quiet until we know what we're dealing with. I don't want whoever did this knowing we're investigating. Patrick nodded and left, taking the IT specialist with him. Karen squeezed Talia's arm. I'm going to make some calls, see if anyone else has experienced anything unusual. Then it was just Talia and Damien in her office, the overhead lights buzzing softly, the city spread out below them in a carpet of lights. Someone's trying to sabotage you, Damien said quietly. I know. Do you have any idea who? Talia looked at him, and they both knew the answer without saying it aloud. Richard. It had to be Richard. Who else had both motive and access? We can't prove anything yet, Damien continued, but we will. And when we do? When you do, what? Talia interrupted. Fire him? Create a massive scandal that proves Richard was right about me being a liability? He broke into your office. We think he did. We don't know. Talia? I'm tired, Damien. She sank into her desk chair, suddenly exhausted. I'm tired of fighting, tired of watching my back, tired of wondering if every person who smiles at me is really waiting for me to fail. You're not failing, aren't I? Someone just stole confidential data from my office, data that could be used to undermine everything we're trying to build. That sounds like failure to me. Damien moved around the desk and crouched down so they were eye level. Listen to me. You are not failing. You're threatening an entrenched power structure, and they're fighting back. That means you're winning. It doesn't feel like winning. Well, it never does in the middle of the war. But think about what you've accomplished in 2 months. You've shown a light on problems people wanted to keep hidden. You've started conversations that needed to happen. You've given employees hope that things can actually change. That's powerful, Talia. Powerful enough that someone felt they had to stop you. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his face that made her breath catch. Not just respect or gratitude, but something deeper, something that made her simultaneously want to move closer and pull away. I can't lose this job, she said quietly. Not because of the money, though that matters, but because if I fail here, it proves that people like me don't belong in places like this, that all the Richards of the world are right when they say some people aren't cut out for it. Then don't fail. Damien stood, offering his hand. Come on, I'm driving you home. You shouldn't take the train this late. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. She let him pull her to her feet, and they rode the elevator down in silence. His car, a sleek Tesla that probably cost more than her entire year's salary, was waiting in the executive parking garage. He opened the passenger door for her, then slid into the driver's seat. Where to? She gave him her address, and he pulled out into the nearly empty streets. Chicago at night was a different city, quieter but somehow more honest, the darkness stripping away the polish to reveal the bones underneath. Can I ask you something? Talia said after several minutes of silence. Anything. Why did you really hire me? And don't give me the corporate answer about community engagement. The real reason. Damien was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough. Because when you looked at Sky that night, you didn't see a burden or a problem or a disabled kid. You saw a person who mattered, And when you looked at me, you didn't see money or power or prestige. You saw a father who was failing his daughter, and you weren't afraid to tell me the truth." He glanced over at her. "I've spent 15 years surrounded by people who tell me what I want to hear. You told me what I needed to hear. That's rare. That's valuable. And I thought, if you could do that for me, imagine what you could do for the company. What if I can't live up to that? You already are." He pulled up in front of her building, a 3-story walk-up in a neighborhood that was gentrifying block by block, holding on to its working-class roots even as coffee shops and yoga studios crept in. Talia unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't move to get out. "Thank you," she said, "for the ride, for believing in me, for all of it." "Talia." He turned to face her. "Whoever broke into your office tonight, whoever's trying to undermine you, they're going to push harder now. Things are going to get worse before they get better. Are you sure you want to keep fighting?" She thought about the survey responses, the anonymous voices crying out for someone to hear them. Thought about Sky's question echoing in her mind. Thought about every time in her life someone had told her she couldn't, she shouldn't, she wasn't enough. "Yeah," she said, "I'm sure." She got out of the car and climbed the stairs to her apartment, and she didn't look back to see if Damien was watching her go. But somehow she knew he was. The security footage told a story that was both damning and frustratingly incomplete. Patrick called Talia into his office 3 days after the breach, Damien already seated in one of the chairs facing the security chief's desk. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. "We've reviewed every camera feed from that afternoon," Patrick said, pulling up video on his monitor. "At 4:23 p.m., approximately 8 minutes after you left for your meeting, someone accessed the 40th floor using an executive keycard." He hit play. The elevator doors opened and a figure stepped out. Average height, wearing a maintenance uniform and a baseball cap pulled low, face angled away from the camera. The person moved with purpose toward Talia's office, glancing up only once, but the camera angle caught nothing useful. Just a glimpse of a jaw, maybe male, maybe not. "They knew exactly where the cameras were," Patrick continued. "This wasn't opportunistic. It was planned." "What about inside the office?" Damien asked. "Your floor doesn't have cameras inside individual offices. Privacy policy." Patrick switched to another feed. "But we got them leaving at 5:02 p.m. Same careful positioning, same avoidance of direct camera angles." Talia watched the figure disappear into the elevator, and something cold settled in her stomach. "The key card. Can you trace it?" "That's where it gets interesting." Patrick pulled up another screen showing access logs. "The card used was registered to maintenance, reported missing 2 weeks ago. We thought it was just misplaced. Now we know it was stolen." "So we have nothing," Talia said flatly. "No face, no name, no proof of who actually did this. We have their height, approximately 5'10", their build, slim to average, and we know they had inside knowledge of your schedule, the building layout, and security protocols." Patrick looked at Damien. "This person either works here or has extensive access to someone who does." "Richard Chen is 5'10", Damien said quietly, "and he has all of that access." "So do about 300 other people in this building," Patrick countered. "I can't go after an executive based on height and motive. I need evidence." "Then get evidence." "I'm trying, but whoever did this knew what they were doing. They're smart, careful, and they've covered their tracks well." Patrick closed the files. "In the meantime, Ms. Reed, I've arranged for enhanced security on your office. New locks, cameras inside, and your computer now requires biometric authentication in addition to passwords." "Great," Talia muttered. "I'm basically under surveillance in my own office." "It's for your protection. It's proof that someone wants me gone badly enough to commit corporate espionage." Nobody argued with that assessment. Talia left Patrick's office feeling like the walls were closing in. The enhanced security made her hyper-aware of every camera, every locked door, every person who glanced at her in the hallway. Paranoia became her constant companion, whispering that everyone was a potential threat, that the friendly small talk was really reconnaissance, that even her allies might be feeding information to her enemies. Karen found her in the bathroom one afternoon, leaning against the sink, breathing hard. "Panic attack?" Karen asked gently, locking the door behind them. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're having a panic attack in the women's bathroom because someone violated your space and your trust, and now you don't feel safe anywhere." Talia looked up at her reflection. Pale skin, dark circles, eyes that looked hunted. How do you do it? Stay here year after year, dealing with this political garbage, knowing that people smile at you while plotting your downfall? I remind myself why I'm here. Karen moved to stand beside her. I had a daughter once, Emily. She died when she was 16. Drunk driver. And in the aftermath, when I was drowning in grief and couldn't function, my employer at the time, a big tech company, not this one, fired me. They said I was underperforming, that I'd missed too many deadlines, that they needed someone more reliable. They threw me away when I needed support most. Karen, I'm so sorry. I came to Blackwell because Damien's predecessor actually had a decent leave policy. And when I got here, I made it my mission to make sure no one else got discarded the way I was. That's why I stay. That's why I fight. She squeezed Talia's shoulder. You need to find your reason. The thing that makes this worth it even when it's hard. Otherwise, the Richards of this world will grind you down until there's nothing left. Talia thought about that conversation all through the rest of the day and into the evening as she reviewed proposals for the new mentorship program. She was still thinking about it when her phone rang at 8:47 p.m. with a number she recognized instantly. Sky? Hey, sweetheart. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, but the girl's voice was shaky, like maybe something was. I wanted to talk to someone. Where's your dad? He's here. He's making dinner, but he's been acting weird all week, stressed, and I heard him on the phone earlier talking about you, and he sounded really worried. Talia closed her laptop. What did he say? Something about evidence and investigations and protecting you? Talia, are you in trouble? No, sweetheart. Not trouble exactly, just work stuff. Complicated adult things. Is someone being mean to you? The question, so direct and childlike, made Talia's throat tighten. Yeah, someone is, but I'm handling it. Dad says you're the bravest person he knows. Your dad's being generous. No, he means it. I heard him tell someone on the phone that you remind him of my mom, that she used to stand up for people too, even when it was hard. Talia had to sit down. Damien had never mentioned his late wife beyond that one admission in the diner, and Talia had never asked, sensing the wound was still too raw. What was your mom like? Strong and funny, and she never let anyone push her around. Sky's voice went softer. I miss her a lot. I bet she was amazing if she raised a kid as smart and brave as you. Do you think she'd be proud of me, even though I can't walk? The question hit like a punch to the chest. Sky, honey, listen to me. Your mom would be so proud of you. Not in spite of your wheelchair, but because of who you are. Kind and thoughtful and strong enough to ask hard questions. The wheelchair doesn't define you. It's just how you get around. Silence on the line. Then quietly, no one's ever said it like that before. Well, it's true. And anyone who can't see how incredible you are doesn't deserve your time. I wish you were here more. Dad's better when you're around, happier. Before Talia could figure out how to respond to that, she heard Damien's voice in the background calling Sky to dinner. I gotta go, Sky said. But Talia, be careful, okay? Whatever's happening at work, just be careful. I will, promise. The line went dead, leaving Talia sitting in her silent office, Sky's words echoing in her head. Dad's better when you're around. Happier. It was dangerous territory, that observation, because Talia had been trying very hard not to notice the way Damien looked at her sometimes, or the way her heart sped up when he walked into a room, or the fact that their late-night conversations about company strategy somehow always drifted into more personal territory. He was her boss, her mentor, the man who'd given her a chance when she had no business qualifications beyond the ability to read people. Getting involved with him would be professional suicide, not to mention a gift-wrapped scandal for Richard and anyone else who wanted her gone. But knowing something was a bad idea and being able to stop feeling it were two different things. The next morning, Talia arrived at the office to find an envelope on her desk. No name, no return address, just thick cream-colored paper that felt expensive between her fingers. Inside was a single sheet with a printed message. Some people don't know when to quit. It would be unfortunate if your past became public knowledge. Consider this a courtesy warning. Her hand started shaking. She read the message 3 more times, trying to make sense of it. What past? She'd been poor. She'd worked minimum wage jobs. She'd struggled. But none of that was secret. Unless someone had dug deeper. Unless they'd found something she'd buried so far down, she'd almost convinced herself it never happened. Karen appeared in her doorway, took one look at Talia's face, and closed the door behind her. What is it? Talia handed her the note without speaking. Karen's expression darkened as she read. This is a threat. It's a warning. Same thing. You need to take this to security. To Damien. No. Talia, no. She grabbed the envelope back. If I go running to Damien every time someone tries to intimidate me, I prove that I can't handle this job. I prove that Richard was right about me being a liability. This isn't about proving anything. Someone is threatening you. Everyone's been threatening me since day one. This is just more explicit. Talia shoved the envelope into her desk drawer. I'm not giving them the satisfaction of seeing me scared. You should be scared. Whoever sent this knows something about you, something they think is damaging enough to use as leverage. Then let them use it. I'm done hiding. Karen studied her face for a long moment. What's in your past, Talia? Nothing that changes who I am now. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. Karen sighed but didn't push. She left, and Talia sat at her desk, staring at the drawer that held the envelope, her mind racing backward through time to a night 11 years ago that she'd spent a decade trying to forget. She'd been 19, working 2 jobs and taking classes at community college, exhausted and broke, and one bad day away from dropping out entirely. Her boyfriend at the time, Marcus, not the cook at Rosie's, but another Marcus, one who dealt drugs on the side to pay his own bills, had asked her to hold a package for him. Just for one night, he'd said. Just until he could make the drop. She'd known it was drugs, she'd known it was illegal, but he'd promised it was safe, and she'd needed the $200 he offered, and she'd been young and stupid enough to say yes. The police had raided her apartment at 2 a.m. They'd found the package. Cocaine, it turned out, enough to qualify as intent to distribute. She'd been arrested, processed, held in a cell that smelled like vomit and despair while Marcus disappeared into the night without a trace. Her public defender had been overworked and underpaid, but he'd managed to get her a deal, plead guilty to possession, not distribution. 6 months probation, community service, and the promise that if she stayed clean, the record would be expunged. She'd done everything they asked. Completed her community service at a homeless shelter, showed up for every probation meeting, stayed so far away from anything illegal that she wouldn't even jaywalk. The record had been expunged 3 years later, sealed and supposedly erased from public databases. But if someone had dug deep enough, if they'd had the resources and motivation, they could have found it. And in the corporate world, even an expunged drug possession charge could be career-ending. It didn't matter that she'd been 19 and desperate. It didn't matter that she'd paid her debt to society. All that would matter was the headline, Blackwell Technologies executive has criminal past. Talia worked through the morning in a fog of anxiety, jumping every time her phone rang, watching the door like she expected armed guards to come arrest her again. By lunch, she couldn't stand the office anymore. She grabbed her coat and headed outside, needing air, needing space, needing to think. She ended up at a small park 3 blocks from the Blackwell building, sitting on a bench that overlooked a playground where kids shrieked and laughed with the kind of freedom she couldn't remember feeling. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear the footsteps approaching until someone sat down beside her. Damien. Patricia said you left the building, he said by way of greeting. She was worried you weren't coming back. Still deciding. Want to talk about it? Not particularly. They sat in silence for a while, watching the kids play. Finally, Damien spoke again. Patrick told me about the threat you received this morning. Talia's head snapped toward him. Karen told you? She's worried about you, so am I. He pulled the envelope from his jacket pocket. Somehow he'd gotten it from her desk and held it up. Whoever sent this is escalating. First the break-in, now direct threats. This isn't corporate politics anymore, Talia. This is something uglier. I can handle it. By ignoring it? By pretending you're not scared? I'm terrified, she admitted, the words bursting out before she could stop them. I'm terrified that someone's going to dig up my past and use it to destroy everything I've built. I'm terrified that I'm going to prove Richard right, that I don't belong in that world, that I was stupid to think a waitress could ever be anything more. Her voice cracked. And I'm terrified that the worst part of all this is that I'm starting to care what you think of me, and that's the most dangerous thing because you're my boss, and this is already complicated enough without adding feelings to the mix. She stopped abruptly, horrified at what she'd just said. Damien was staring at her, his expression unreadable. Talia, forget I said anything. I'm stressed and not thinking clearly, and I think about you constantly, he interrupted. I think about the way you stood in the rain that night and taught me how to see my own daughter. I think about the courage it takes to walk into that building every day knowing half the executives want you to fail. I think about how you make me want to be better, not just as a CEO, but as a person, as a father, as a man. He shifted closer, his voice dropping. And you're right, it is dangerous. It's complicated and messy and potentially catastrophic for both of us professionally. But ignoring it isn't working, at least not for me. Talia's heart was hammering so hard she could barely hear over the sound of her own pulse. What are we doing? I don't know. But whatever's in your past, whatever someone thinks they can use against you, I need you to trust me with it. Let me help. She closed her eyes. The smart thing would be to walk away, to maintain professional distance, to handle this alone the way she'd handled everything else in her life. But she was so tired of being alone. So tired of carrying everything by herself. When I was 19, I was arrested for drug possession, she said quietly. My boyfriend at the time was a dealer. He asked me to hold a package, and I was broke and stupid and said yes. The police raided my apartment, found cocaine, arrested me. I took a plea deal, did probation and community service, and the record was expunged. But if someone dug deep enough, they could find it. And if it becomes public, it won't. You don't know that? Yes, I do. Because I'm going to find whoever sent this threat, and I'm going to make sure they understand that coming after you means coming after me. He took her hand, his grip warm and steady. You made a mistake when you were 19. You paid for it. It doesn't define you, Talia. It doesn't change what you've accomplished or who you've become. Richard won't see it that way. Neither will the board. Then they'll have to go through me first. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the same determination she'd seen that night in the rain when he'd promised Skye he'd be better. Damien Blackwell didn't make promises lightly, and when he did, he kept them. Okay, she whispered. Okay. He squeezed her hand once, then released it, and they sat together on that bench while the kids played and the city moved around them. And for just a moment, Talia let herself believe that maybe she didn't have to fight this battle alone. But the moment shattered 3 days later when an email landed in her inbox at 6:47 a.m. The sender was anonymous, the subject line blank, and the message contained just one line. Check the Tribune website. Talia's hands were shaking as she opened her browser and navigated to the Chicago Tribune. The headline hit her like a freight train. Blackwell Technologies executive hired despite criminal past. The article was thorough and devastating. It detailed her arrest, the charges, the plea deal. It quoted anonymous sources, longtime employees concerned about the company's hiring standards, who questioned whether someone with a drug conviction should be in a position of authority. It mentioned her previous job as a waitress, painting it as evidence that she was unqualified for her current role. And it raised the question of whether Damien had known about her past when he hired her, implying either negligence or favoritism. Talia read the article 3 times, each pass making her feel smaller and more exposed. By the time she finished, her phone was ringing. Damien. I'm pulling the article, he said without preamble. Our lawyers are already on it. You can't pull it. It's already out there. People have already read it. Then we'll issue a statement. We'll explain that you disclosed your past during the hiring process, that we did our due diligence, that an expunged record from 11 years ago has no bearing on your qualifications or performance. Did I disclose it during the hiring process? Silence. I didn't think I had to, Talia continued, her voice hollow. The record was expunged. Legally, it's like it never happened. But now everyone's going to know, and Richard's going to use this to prove I'm exactly what he said I was, an unqualified charity case. You're not... Don't. She cut him off. Don't tell me it doesn't matter. We both know it does. In your world, perception is reality. And the perception now is that I'm a criminal who lied her way into a job she didn't deserve. Talia, listen to me. I have to go. She hung up before he could respond, silenced her phone, and sat in her apartment staring at the wall as her entire world collapsed around her. The article spread through social media like wildfire. By noon, she had 17 missed calls and 43 emails, half of them from reporters asking for comment, the other half from colleagues either offering support or very politely distancing themselves. Karen showed up at her door at 2 p.m., letting herself in with the spare key Talia had given her weeks ago. You're not answering your phone. There's nothing to say. There's plenty to say. Starting with the fact that whoever leaked your record committed a crime. Expunged records are sealed for a reason. Accessing them without legal cause is illegal, and using them to damage someone's reputation is actionable. Great. So I can sue them after my career is destroyed. That's comforting. Karen sat down on the couch beside her. Damien's calling an emergency board meeting. He's going to make a statement defending you and explaining the situation. That'll just make it worse. Now it looks like he's protecting me because... She stopped abruptly. Because what? Because he cares about you? Talia, half the office already knows there's something between you two. The way he looks at you in meetings isn't exactly subtle. There's nothing between us. We're colleagues. You're a terrible liar. Karen's voice softened. But that's not the point. The point is that you have people who believe in you. Damien, me, the employees who've seen the difference you're making. Don't let Richard or whoever did this win by walking away. I don't know if I have anything left to fight with. Then borrow some of mine. I've got plenty of rage to spare. Despite everything, Talia smiled. But the smile faded as her phone, still silenced but visible on the coffee table, lit up with another call. This one from an unknown number with a Chicago area code. Against her better judgment, she answered. Ms. Reed, this is Jonathan Price from Price Investigations. I've been retained by Blackwell Technologies to look into the leak of your sealed record. I was hoping you could come by my office tomorrow to discuss the case. Did Damien hire you? He did. He's authorized me to use whatever resources necessary to find who did this and build a case for prosecution. Talia closed her eyes. Even now, even when it would probably be smarter to cut his losses and let her go quietly, Damien was fighting for her. Okay, she said. Text me the address. I'll be there. She hung up and looked at Karen. He hired a private investigator. Of course he did. I told you, he's not letting this go. He should. This is going to damage him too. Maybe he's decided you're worth the damage. The next morning, Talia forced herself to get dressed, put on professional clothes that felt like armor, and take a cab to the address Jonathan Price had sent. His office was in a nondescript building downtown, the kind of place that spoke of steady competence rather than flash. Price himself was in his 50s, graying at the temples with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Ms. Reed, thank you for coming. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. I've been reviewing your case, and I have to tell you, whoever accessed your record knew what they were doing. Sealed records aren't easy to get. You need either law enforcement credentials, a court order, or someone on the inside with access to the database. So what does that tell you? It tells me this wasn't Richard Chen acting alone. He might be the one with motive, but he doesn't have the technical skills or access to pull this off. He had help. From who? That's what I'm working to find out. But here's what I know so far. He pulled up a file on his computer. The Tribune article was submitted by a freelance journalist named Mark Stevens. Stevens has a history of taking cash from anonymous sources for hit pieces. He's not a legitimate investigative reporter. He's a hired gun who'll print whatever he's paid to print. Can you trace the payment? Already did. It came from a shell company registered in Delaware, classic money laundering setup. But shell companies have to be created by someone, and that someone leaves a trail. I'm following it. How long will that take? Could be days, could be weeks. These things take time. He leaned back in his chair. In the meantime, I need you to think carefully about who might want you gone badly enough to commit multiple crimes. The break-in, the threat, the illegal record access, these aren't pranks. This is a coordinated campaign. Talia thought about Richard's face when she'd called him out in the meeting. Thought about the way he'd looked at her like she was an insect that needed to be crushed. But Karen was right. Richard was arrogant and hostile. But was he really capable of this level of calculated destruction? I don't know, she admitted. Richard's the obvious suspect, but something about this feels bigger than one man's ego. Trust that instinct. In my experience, the obvious suspect is often a distraction from the real threat. Price closed his file. One more thing. Mr. Blackwell asked me to remind you that he has a board meeting this afternoon. He wants you there. Why would I? Because showing up is how you prove you're not beaten. Because hiding gives your enemies exactly what they want. He stood, signaling the meeting was over. You seem like a smart woman, Ms. Reed. Smart enough to know that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk back into the room that tried to destroy you. Talia left his office with those words ringing in her ears. She had 3 hours before the board meeting. 3 hours to decide whether she was going to fight or surrender. She thought about Skye asking if her dad loved her. Thought about the survey responses from employees who were finally brave enough to hope things could change. Thought about Karen losing her daughter and staying anyway. Thought about Damien's hand warm in hers and his promise that she didn't have to fight alone. At 2:55 p.m., Talia walked into the Blackwell Technologies building with her head high and her resolve hardening into something unbreakable. The looks she got from people in the lobby ranged from sympathetic to hostile, but she didn't stop, didn't acknowledge them. She just walked to the elevator, rode up to the executive floor, and made her way to the boardroom where the meeting was about to start. Damien was standing near the windows, talking in low tones with 2 board members. He looked up as she entered, and something that might have been relief flashed across his face. Talia, I'm glad you're here. Where else would I be? Richard was already seated at the table, his expression smug. Several other executives were scattered around the room, their conversations dying as Talia took a seat near Damien. The board members filed in over the next few minutes. 7 stern-faced individuals who collectively held enough power to make or break the company. The chairwoman, Margaret Walsh, called the meeting to order. Mr. Blackwell requested this emergency session to address concerns raised by recent media coverage regarding one of our executives. Mr. Blackwell, the floor is yours. Damien stood, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. I want to make something very clear to this board and to everyone in this room. Talia Reed is one of the most valuable hires this company has ever made. In the 3 months she's been here, she's identified critical problems in our culture, launched initiatives that are already showing measurable improvements in employee satisfaction, and demonstrated a level of integrity that should be the standard for everyone who works here. But surely the revelation of her criminal past, one of the board members began. There is no criminal past, Damien interrupted. There's an expunged record from a mistake she made at 19 years old. A mistake she took responsibility for, paid her debt to society for, and that legally no longer exists. The fact that someone illegally accessed that sealed record and leaked it to the press is the real crime we should be discussing. Nevertheless, Margaret said carefully, the optics are concerning. Our stakeholders expect results, and Talia has delivered results. Employee turnover is down 18% since she implemented her programs. Productivity is up. Our recent employer rating on industry websites has improved significantly. Those are the metrics that should matter, not a sealed record that someone committed a crime to expose. Richard cleared his throat. With all due respect, Damien, this isn't just about the record. It's about judgment. Ms. Reed's hiring was highly irregular. No formal search process. No vetting by HR. Just a personal decision made after an emotional incident. The board has a right to question whether that decision was sound. The board has a right to question anything, Damien agreed. But let me be absolutely clear about something. If this board forces me to choose between keeping Talia Reed and maintaining my position as CEO, I'll choose Talia. Because what she represents, the belief that people deserve second chances, that past mistakes don't define future potential, that kindness and competence aren't mutually exclusive, that's the kind of company I want to lead. And if you don't want to lead that kind of company, then maybe you need a different CEO. The silence that followed was absolute. Talia's heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Damien had just staked his entire career on her, and the enormity of that sacrifice left her breathless. Margaret exchanged glances with the other board members. That's quite a statement, Mr. Blackwell. It's the truth. Then I think we need to discuss this in executive session. Ms. Reed, if you could please step outside. Talia stood on shaking legs and walked out of the boardroom, closing the door behind her. The hallway was empty, eerily quiet, and she sank into one of the chairs near Patricia's desk and tried to process what had just happened. Damien had defended her. More than that, he'd been willing to lose everything for her. The meeting lasted 47 minutes. Talia counted every one of them, watching the clock on the wall and imagining all the ways this could end badly. When the door finally opened, Margaret emerged first, her expression unreadable. "Ms. Reed, would you come back in, please?" Talia walked back into the boardroom on legs that felt like water. All eyes turned to her as she took her seat. Margaret spoke first. "The board has reviewed the situation and heard Mr. Blackwell's statement. After careful consideration, we've decided to stand by your employment. However, we're requiring that you and Mr. Blackwell work with our PR team to develop a transparent public response to the Tribune article. We won't hide from this, but we will control the narrative." "Thank you," Talia managed. "I won't let you down." "See that you don't." Margaret gathered her papers. Meeting adjourned. The board members filed out, followed by most of the executives. Richard lingered, his gaze moving between Talia and Damien with barely concealed disdain. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "You won today, but the war's far from finished." He left before either of them could respond, and then it was just Talia and Damien in the empty boardroom, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows and painting everything gold. "You didn't have to do that," Talia said. "Yes, I did. You could have lost your job. I've been CEO for 12 years. I've built this company into something powerful and profitable. But if I can't use that power to protect people who deserve protecting, then what's the point?" He moved closer. "You walked into a rainstorm to save my daughter. The least I can do is walk into a boardroom to save your career. Damien, I meant what I said in that park, about thinking about you constantly, about wanting to be better because of you." He was standing right in front of her now, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his eyes. "I know it's complicated. I know it's risky, but I'm tired of pretending I don't feel this." "So am I," she whispered. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, but she didn't. His hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone, and then he was kissing her, soft and careful, and full of all the things they'd been too afraid to say out loud. When they finally pulled apart, Talia was trembling. "We can't do this here," she said, even though every cell in her body was screaming at her to pull him back. "I know." But he didn't move away. "Tomorrow. Come to my place for dinner. Just us. No company politics, no board meetings, no audience. Just two people trying to figure out if this is real or if we're both losing our minds. That's probably the worst idea you've ever had." "Probably. Is that a yes?" Talia looked at him. This man who'd been a stranger 4 months ago and was now somehow essential, who'd risked everything to defend her, who looked at her like she mattered not because of what she could do for him, but because of who she was. "Yes," she said. "It's a yes." Talia spent that evening second-guessing everything. She stood in front of her closet for 20 minutes trying to decide what you wore to dinner with your boss who'd just kissed you in a boardroom after defending you to the entire board of directors. Professional seemed wrong. Too casual felt disrespectful. She finally settled on dark jeans and a soft sweater, something that said she was trying without trying too hard, and took a cab to Damien's address in Lincoln Park. The house was beautiful in that understated way that screamed old money, a 3-story Victorian with warm light glowing in the windows. Talia stood on the front steps for a solid minute, her finger hovering over the doorbell, before finally pressing it. Damien answered immediately, like he'd been waiting by the door. He'd changed out of his suit into jeans and a button-down with the sleeves rolled up, and somehow that made him seem more human and more dangerous all at once. "Hi," he said, and there was something uncertain in his voice that made her relax fractionally. "Hi. I almost turned around 3 times on the way here." "I'm glad you didn't." He stepped back to let her in. "Sky's upstairs doing homework. She knows you're here. She made me promise to call her down before you leave." The house was warm and lived in, filled with the kind of comfortable furniture that came from actual use rather than designer staging. Photos lined the hallway. Sky at various ages. Damien looking younger and happier, and in several frames a beautiful woman with dark hair and Sky's eyes who must have been his late wife. Talia stopped in front of one photo. She was lovely. She was everything. Damien's voice went soft. Emma. She died 6 years ago. Car accident. 1 minute she was there and the next. He didn't finish. I didn't handle it well. I threw myself into work because grief hurt too much. And somewhere along the way, I forgot that Sky was grieving too. That she needed a father, not a CEO who occasionally showed up to sign permission slips. You're doing better now. Because you reminded me what actually matters. He led her to the kitchen, where something that smelled incredible was simmering on the stove. I hope you like pasta. It's one of the 5 things I can make without burning the house down. Pasta's perfect. They fell into an easy rhythm. Him cooking, her setting the table, both of them dancing around the elephant in the room until finally Talia couldn't stand it anymore. We need to talk about what happened today. Damien set down the wooden spoon he'd been using. You mean the kiss? Or me threatening to quit if they fired you? Both, either. All of it. She leaned against the counter. You put your entire career on the line for me. I meant what I said. If the board wanted me to choose between my position and doing the right thing, that's not a choice. It's a test of character. But what if they'd called your bluff? What if they'd actually forced you to resign? Then I would have resigned. He moved closer to her. Talia, I've spent 12 years building a company I'm proud of, but in the last 4 months, you've shown me that what I built isn't as good as I thought it was. That success without humanity is just emptiness with better profit margins. I'd rather walk away and start over with my integrity intact than stay and become the kind of leader who sacrifices good people to protect my own position. That's terrifyingly noble. That's just being decent. The bar's gotten so low that basic decency looks like heroism. He reached out and took her hand. And about the kiss, I'm not sorry it happened, but I am sorry if it complicated things for you. If you want to pretend it never happened, if you need space, if... She kissed him, cut him off mid-sentence by pulling him down and pressing her mouth to his, and this time it was less careful, more desperate, full of all the fear and fight and feeling they'd been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien rested his forehead against hers. Okay, he said roughly. So we're not pretending it didn't happen? Definitely not. Good, because I don't think I could. They ate dinner at the kitchen table, talking about everything except work, books they'd read, places they wanted to travel, embarrassing childhood stories that made them both laugh. Sky rolled down halfway through, took one look at them sitting close together with matching grins, and smiled so wide it was like watching the sun come up. Dad looks happy, she announced. Like really happy. Not fake for company happy. Thanks for that observation, sweetheart, Damien said dryly. It's true, though. Sky wheeled over to the table and stole a piece of garlic bread from Talia's plate. So are you guys dating now? Sky, it's okay to say yes. I won't tell anyone. Well, except maybe my friend Madison, but she's good at keeping secrets. Talia laughed. We're figuring it out, honey. It's complicated. Adults always say things are complicated when they mean they're scared. Sky said it matter-of-factly, without judgment, and the observation landed like a dart straight to Talia's chest. You're too smart for your own good, Damien told his daughter. I know, it's a blessing and a curse. She grinned and headed back toward the stairs. I'm going to finish my homework. Talia, don't leave without saying goodbye. I won't, promise. After Sky disappeared upstairs, Damien looked at Talia with something that might have been wonder. She really loves you. The feeling's mutual. She's an incredible kid. She is, and she's been better, happier, more confident since you've been in our lives. That's not a small thing. I think she's been waiting for someone to see her the way her mom did, not as a disability or a responsibility, but just as Sky. You see everyone that way. It's one of the things He stopped, and Talia's heart stuttered. One of the things you what? One of the things I admire about you. But the way he said it, the way he was looking at her, made it clear that admire wasn't quite the word he'd been reaching for. They moved to the living room, sitting close together on the couch, and the conversation drifted into quieter territory. Damien told her about Emma, about how they'd met in college and built a life together, about how her death had shattered something in him he wasn't sure could be fixed. "I thought I'd never feel this way again," he admitted. "After Emma, I convinced myself that was it. I'd had my chance at love and I wasn't getting another one. That was the deal. Life doesn't work that way. I'm starting to realize that." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "But us, it's going to be scrutinized. People are already talking. Richard's going to use it as ammunition. We need to be prepared for that." "I know, but I'm tired of making decisions based on what Richard might do. If we're doing this, we're doing it because it's right for us, not because it's strategic or safe." "When did you get so brave?" "Around the same time you started believing I could be." They sat there for a long time, talking and not talking, until Talia finally remembered she'd promised to say goodbye to Sky. She found the girl upstairs in a bedroom decorated with dragon posters and bookshelves packed so full they were bowing. "Hey, sweetheart, I'm heading out." Sky looked up from her laptop. "Are you coming back?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you going to keep being around? Or was this just a one-time thing?" There was vulnerability in the question, the fear of someone who'd lost people before and knew it could happen again. Talia sat on the edge of the bed. "I'm not going anywhere, Sky. I promise. Even if work gets bad again? Even if people are mean to you? Even then. You and your dad, you're important to me. That doesn't change just because things get hard." Sky studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, I believe you." She hesitated, then added quietly, "My mom used to say that the best people are the ones who stay when it would be easier to leave. I think she would have liked you." Talia's throat tightened. "I think I would have liked her too." She left Damien's house feeling lighter than she had in months, like something that had been wound too tight finally had room to breathe. But the lightness shattered the next morning when she arrived at the office to find Jonathan Price waiting in her office, his expression grim. "We need to talk. Now." Karen appeared in the doorway moments later. "Damien's on his way up. Price called him 10 minutes ago." "What's going on?" "I found something," Price said. "Something big. But you're not going to like it." Damien arrived looking like he'd run from wherever he'd been, his hair slightly messed, his tie askew. "What is it?" Price pulled out his laptop and turned it so they could all see the screen. "I traced the shell company that paid Mark Stevens for the hit piece. It took some digging, but I finally found the real owner. Or rather, owners. Plural." He pulled up a series of documents, incorporation papers, wire transfer records, email exchanges. The company was created by 3 people: Richard Chen, Jennifer Morrison, and David Brennan. The room went dead silent. Jennifer, the COO, David, the CFO, and Richard, 3 of the most senior executives at Blackwell Technologies, working together. "This wasn't just Richard acting alone," Price continued. "This was a coordinated effort by 3 executives who saw Talia as a threat to their power structure. They pooled resources, hired someone to illegally access her sealed record, and then paid a journalist to publish it." "That's criminal conspiracy," Karen said, her voice shaking with rage. "That's grounds for immediate termination and prosecution." "There's more." Price pulled up another file. "While I was investigating, I found something else. Richard, Jennifer, and David have been systematically manipulating company finances for the past 2 years. Nothing dramatic, just small redirects here and there, bonuses that don't quite match the recorded amounts, expense accounts that are slightly inflated. Individually, each instance is small enough to escape notice. Collectively, they've embezzled approximately $8.3 million. Damien's face had gone pale. "Show me the evidence." Price walked them through it. Spreadsheets, transfer records, expense reports, with subtle alterations. The pattern was clear once you knew to look for it. 3 executives using their positions to slowly drain company resources while covering their tracks just well enough to avoid detection. "They've been stealing from us for 2 years, Damien said quietly, "and we never knew." "You weren't looking," Price said. "Why would you? They're senior executives. They have your trust. That's what made it possible." "So what do we do?" Talia asked, though she already knew the answer. "We prosecute," Damien said, and his voice was ice. "All 3 of them. criminal and civil charges. I want every penny recovered, and I want them to face consequences. That's going to create a massive scandal, Karen warned. 3 senior executives arrested for embezzlement and conspiracy? The media will have a field day. Let them. I'd rather deal with the public scandal than let this continue. Damien looked at Talia. Are you prepared for what comes next? Because once we move on this, it's going to get ugly. It's already ugly. At least this way we're fighting back with truth instead of just absorbing hits. Okay. Damien pulled out his phone. I'm calling our legal team and the board. Price. I need all of this documented and ready to present. Karen, start preparing termination paperwork for all 3 of them. And Talia. He paused, something fierce and protective crossing his face. Thank you. If you hadn't pushed back, if you just quit when they wanted you to, we never would have dug deep enough to find this. I didn't do it to expose embezzlement. I did it because I was too stubborn to let Richard win. Sometimes stubbornness is just courage with worse PR. The next 48 hours were a controlled explosion. Legal teams descended, the board was briefed, federal prosecutors were contacted. And on a cold Tuesday morning, Richard Chen, Jennifer Morrison, and David Brennan were called into 3 separate conference rooms and confronted with the evidence. Talia wasn't present for Richard's meeting, but she heard about it afterward from Karen. He'd tried to bluster his way through at first, claiming the evidence was fabricated, that this was retaliation for questioning Damien's judgment. But when the lawyers laid out the wire transfers with his name attached, when they showed him the emails from his own account discussing how to cover their tracks, his bravado had crumbled. Jennifer had cried. David had demanded his lawyer and refused to say another word. All 3 were terminated immediately. Security escorted them from the building while employees watched in stunned silence. By noon, the news had broken publicly, and the media frenzy Damien had predicted was in full swing. But something unexpected happened. Instead of the scandal destroying Blackwell Technologies, it had the opposite effect. Employees saw that leadership was willing to hold even senior executives accountable. The public saw a company choosing integrity over protecting powerful people. Industry analysts praised Damien's swift action, and gradually the narrative shifted from Blackwell Technologies is corrupt to Blackwell Technologies cleaned house. The woman who replaced Jennifer as COO was someone Talia had worked with on the culture initiatives, a brilliant strategist who'd been passed over for promotions for years because she dared to question toxic practices. The new CFO was recruited from outside, someone with a reputation for transparency and ethics. And Richard's position was divided among 3 people, none of whom had his ego or his contempt for anyone he considered beneath him. 3 months later, the company looked completely different. The culture initiatives Talia had launched were in full swing. Employee satisfaction scores had climbed 29%. Turnover was at a 5-year low. And the company had just been named one of the best places to work in tech by a major industry publication. Talia was in her office reviewing applications for the expanded mentorship program when Sky's face appeared on her video call screen. Surprise! Dad's letting me call from his office. Talia laughed. Is he now? And what does that cost him? Ice cream after dinner for a week, Sky grinned. But I wanted to tell you something. You know how I've been doing physical therapy? Of course. How's that going? Really good. My therapist says I'm getting stronger, and I've been thinking... Sky's face turned serious. I've been thinking about trying out for adaptive soccer. There's a league, and some kids from school are doing it, and I thought maybe I could too. Talia's chest tightened with pride. Sweetheart, that's amazing. You absolutely should. You'll come watch when I have games? I wouldn't miss it for the world. Dad says that too. He's already cleared his calendar for the whole season. No meetings during game times. He's learning. We both are. Learning that it's okay to need people, that asking for help isn't weak. Sky paused. You taught us that. After the call ended, Talia sat quietly for a moment, thinking about how much had changed since that night in the rain. A forgotten child had become confident enough to try new things. A workaholic CEO had learned to put his daughter first, and a waitress who'd thought she had no business in a boardroom had helped reshape an entire company culture. Karen appeared in her doorway. Got a minute? Always. Karen came in and closed the door, her expression unreadable. I just got off the phone with Margaret Walsh. The board wants to expand your role. Talia's stomach dropped. Expand how? They're creating a new C-suite position, Chief People Officer. They want you to take it. Karen, I can't. I've only been here 6 months, and in those 6 months, you've done more to transform this company than most executives do in a decade. They're not offering you this because they feel sorry for you or because Damien asked them to. They're offering it because you've earned it. Karen smiled. So what do you say? Talia thought about the girl she'd been at 19, arrested and terrified in a cell that smelled like despair. Thought about the woman she'd been at 29, working double shifts at a diner and wondering if this was all her life would ever be. And thought about who she was now, someone who'd learned that past mistakes didn't have to define future potential, that courage was often just stubbornness in disguise, and that sometimes the people who started with the least ended up contributing the most. I say yes, but on one condition. What's that? I want to create a program for hiring people with non-traditional backgrounds, people who've made mistakes, people who don't have fancy degrees, people who've been overlooked because they don't fit the usual mold. I want to prove that talent exists everywhere if you're willing to look for it. Karen's smile widened. Write up the proposal. I'll make sure it gets to the board. That evening, Talia drove to Damien's house for dinner, something that had become a regular occurrence over the past few months, though they were still keeping their relationship relatively quiet at work. She found him in the kitchen making what looked like an elaborate attempt at lasagna, with Skye supervising from her wheelchair and providing commentary. Dad, you're putting in way too much cheese. There's no such thing as too much cheese. There definitely is. Talia, tell him. Talia laughed and moved to kiss Damien's cheek. Actually, I'm on his side with this one. More cheese is almost always the answer. See, Damien said triumphantly. Talia agrees. You guys are hopeless. But Skye was grinning. Over dinner, which was delicious despite Skye's skepticism, Talia told them about the board's offer. Skye cheered so loudly she almost knocked over her water glass. Damien's pride was written all over his face. You deserve this, he said. Every bit of it. I couldn't have done it without you, either of you. That's not true, Skye said seriously. You could have, but it's better that you didn't have to. Later, after Skye had gone to bed, Talia and Damien sat on the back porch overlooking the small garden Emma had planted years ago. The spring air was cool, but not cold, full of the promise of growth and renewal. I've been thinking, Damien said, his arm around her shoulders. About us. About what comes next. What comes next? We've been keeping this quiet at work, for good reasons. We didn't want to give people ammunition, didn't want anyone to say you were succeeding because of our relationship rather than your own merit. But now, with your promotion, with everything that's happened, I don't want to hide anymore. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to tell people. Not make some big announcement, but stop pretending we're just colleagues. Let ourselves actually be together, publicly, if you want that. Talia turned to look at him. In the moonlight, with his guard down and his heart visible in his eyes, he looked younger and more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. I want that, she said. I want all of it, even the complicated parts. Especially the complicated parts? Especially those. He kissed her then, slow and deep, and when they finally pulled apart, Talia rested her head on his shoulder and looked up at the stars. Can I tell you something? She said quietly. Anything. That night in the rain when I found Skye, I almost didn't go outside. I was so tired, so ready to just lock up and go home. I saw her through the window and thought about how it wasn't my problem, how I already had enough to deal with. But then I thought about what kind of person walks away when someone needs help, and I decided I didn't want to be that person. I'm glad you made that choice. So am I. Because it led to all of this. To you, to Skye, to a career I never could have imagined. One decision made at midnight in a rainstorm, and my entire life changed. She lifted her head to look at him. Makes you think about how many lives change because of small moments of choosing to care when it would be easier not to. You didn't just change your life, you changed mine, Skye's, even the lives of people at the company who'll never know your name but will benefit from the culture you helped build. Damien's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. That's the real legacy. Not the titles or the money or the success. It's the ripple effect of one person deciding that human dignity matters more than convenience. 6 months after that conversation, Talia stood in front of the entire company at the annual all-hands meeting. She'd been chief people officer for 4 months, and in that time she'd launched the non-traditional hiring program she'd proposed. They'd hired 15 people so far. Former inmates who'd served their time, people with disabilities who'd been told they weren't worth investing in, individuals who'd dropped out of high school but had skills that mattered more than degrees. Every single one of them was thriving. "I want to introduce you to someone," Talia said, gesturing to the young woman standing beside her on the stage. "This is Maya Chen." 6 months ago, Maya was working 3 part-time jobs trying to make ends meet. She had no college degree, no tech experience, and a background that most HR departments would have rejected without a second thought. But she had something more important. She had potential, creativity, and the kind of problem-solving skills you can't teach in a classroom. Maya smiled nervously as Talia continued. "In the 4 months since Maya joined our customer service team, she's reduced complaint resolution time by 37%. She designed a new workflow system that we're now implementing company-wide, and she's mentoring 2 other new hires who came from similar backgrounds. That's what happens when you give people a chance. That's what happens when you look past the resume to see the person." The applause was thunderous. Talia caught Damien's eye in the front row, saw the pride on his face, and felt something settle in her chest that she'd been chasing her entire life. The bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. After the meeting, as employees filed out and the auditorium slowly emptied, Skye rolled up to the stage. She was almost 10 now, taller and stronger, her confidence radiating in a way it never had when Talia first met her. "That was really cool," Skye said. "The speech." "Thanks, sweetheart. I was nervous." "You didn't look nervous. You look like someone who knows what she's talking about." Skye hesitated. "Can I tell you something?" "Always." "I've been thinking about that night, the night you found me in the rain, and I realized something. You saved my life, but not in the way people usually mean. You saved it by showing me that people could actually see me, really see me. Not just the wheelchair or the disability, but me." Her eyes filled with tears. "Before that night, I felt invisible. After, I felt like I mattered, and that changed everything." Talia knelt down so they were eye level. "You've always mattered, Skye. Always. The only thing that changed was that people finally started paying attention. Maybe, but you were the first one. You're the reason Dad changed, the reason I got braver, the reason—" Her voice broke. "The reason I'm not scared anymore." They hugged, tight and fierce, and when Talia finally stood, Damien was there, watching them with an expression that held everything words couldn't capture. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Home. Such a simple word, but loaded with meaning. Not just a house or an address, but a place where you were known and loved, where you could be fully yourself, where the hard days didn't diminish the good ones. "Yeah," Talia said, taking his hand. "Let's go home." Years later, when people asked Talia Reid, Chief People Officer of Blackwell Technologies, named one of the most influential leaders in tech, known for revolutionary programs that changed how companies thought about hiring and culture, when people asked how her story began, she always gave the same answer. It began with a child in the rain. A moment when she could have walked away, but chose to stay. A decision made from exhaustion and compassion, and the stubborn belief that people deserved help even when it was inconvenient. Everything that came after, the career, the love, the impact that rippled out further than she could measure, all of it traced back to that single choice: to run into a storm instead of away from it, to see a forgotten child and refuse to let her stay forgotten, to believe that one person caring could matter. And it did matter. It mattered more than Talia could have imagined on that freezing December night when she was just a waitress with sore feet and an overdraft notice, when her biggest dream was making rent and maybe, someday, finding a job that didn't leave her empty. She'd found so much more than that. She'd found purpose, found family, found proof that the best things in life often started with the hardest choices, and that courage didn't mean being unafraid. It meant being terrified and showing up anyway. Somewhere in the city, Another person was probably facing their own storm, wondering if they had the strength to step into it. Talia couldn't help them all, but she'd helped some, and those some had helped others. And maybe that was enough. To know that kindness multiplied, that second chances created third and fourth and fifth chances, that one woman refusing to walk away could start a chain reaction that changed hundreds of lives. The rain had stopped years ago, but its lessons remained. That everyone deserved dignity, that past mistakes didn't define future potential, that the people society overlooked often had the most to offer, that love could be found in unexpected places, with unexpected people, if you were brave enough to let it in, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was see someone, really see them, acknowledge their humanity when the rest of the world had decided they were invisible. Talia Reid had been invisible once. She remembered what that felt like, the ache of it, the loneliness, the slow erosion of hope. That memory kept her honest, kept her humble, kept her fighting for every person who walked through Blackwell's doors, wondering if they were good enough, qualified enough, worthy enough. They were. They always had been. Someone just needed to see it. And now, finally, someone did.